The story begins by showing us the setting, one of the luxury suites at the Grand Hotel Iwa. Inside the steam-filled bathroom, the red-haired Yahello finishes her shower, completely unaware of the blackmail game unfolding in the bedroom. Fan Chao refuses to back down. Her family's financial investment will remain frozen unless she swallows her pride and agrees to become his girlfriend. The tense atmosphere is suddenly shattered by loud, aggressive knocks at the door, instantly irritating the wealthy heir. Wanting to deal with the interruption as quickly as possible, Fan Chao heads to the door. On the other side, a food delivery driver waits calmly, completely unfazed. Things spiral out of control the moment Yahello steps out of the bathroom and appears right behind Chao, wearing nothing but a bath towel. The shock hits instantly. The delivery driver freezes the moment he sees the half-dressed woman and completely loses his composure, dropping the food bag onto the floor. Furious over the ruined order and canceled delivery, Fan Chao starts yelling in the hallway, humiliating the worker with harsh insults for his lack of attention. That's when the story takes a sharp turn. As Yahello looks closer at the delivery driver's face through the chaos, she freezes in disbelief after realizing the obvious. That man was Yesin, her own husband. Fan Chao's confidence cracks for a split second after the revelation, but the shock quickly turns into mockery. The rich heir bursts into laughter, ridiculing the situation and mocking the fact that the woman's husband is such a loser that he has to grind away as a delivery driver just to survive. For the last 3 years, that delivery driver had been the perfect partner, taking care of every household chore in Yahello's home and cleaning up after her pets without ever complaining. He respected his wife so much that he even accepted the fact that she had never allowed them to be physically intimate. Seeing the woman he believed was loyal in another man's arms completely shatters the hard-working man emotionally. Instead of apologizing, Yahello joins her lover in humiliating her husband, calling him a failure. She throws it in his face that Fan Chao is the heir to the powerful Fang Group, a billionaire CEO and the only man worthy of her. The wealthy heir keeps pushing further, telling Yesin that if he kneels and begs for forgiveness, he might just leave him a 5-star rating on the delivery app. To Chao, the betrayed husband is nothing more than disposable trash standing in the way of his knight. Everything changes in seconds. The moment Yesin sees his rival trying to touch his wife, something inside him snaps. Without hesitation, he lunges forward and grabs the millionaire by the throat with brutal force, squeezing hard enough to cut off his breathing. The tables turn instantly. The arrogant heir starts screaming in panic, crying and begging to be freed from the deadly grip. Terrified as she watches her lover struggle to breathe, Yahello throws herself between them. She demands that her husband let go of the millionaire immediately, threatening to call hotel security if he keeps attacking the man she chose to love. Hearing his own wife defend another man so fiercely breaks whatever remained of Yesin's heart. He remembers how it all began. Their marriage had been arranged at her grandfather's request, and he genuinely believed they would build a lasting love story together. Finally seeing how naive he had been, the hard-working man releases the rich heir and decides to walk away from the humiliation, silently hoping she'll regret her actions one day. As he walks down the suite hallway, he's still forced to hear Yahello complain out loud about the burden of being tied to a loser for so long. Fate begins shifting gears on the city streets. Still wearing his delivery uniform, Yesin answers what seems like an ordinary work call, but the voice on the other end immediately changes tone, addressing him as the third young master. The message is clear. His 3-year trial as a submissive son-in-law has officially ended. From now on, he is expected to take over the family business empire. The clan leader has purchased the massive Huasheng Corporation and appointed Yesin directly as chairman of the board. Faced with this new reality, the subordinate on the phone asks whether the young wife should be welcomed into the powerful family as an heiress. Without hesitation, the newly made billionaire refuses. Ending the call, Yesin walks confidently down the avenue, leaving behind a past full of humiliation. The clock strikes 8 at night when Yahello opens the door to one of the apartments inside New Yunu residence, kicking off the final confrontation. Completely without remorse, she verbally attacks her husband, accusing him of acting childish for leaving home after catching her at the hotel. To her, the betrayal means nothing. In her twisted logic, a man living under her roof should simply accept and tolerate any mistake she makes in silence. Yesin finally reaches his breaking point. Slamming his hand against the table, he cuts off his wife's arrogant speech. The former delivery driver unleashes 3 years of bottled-up humiliation, the constant insults from her parents, the physical abuse from her uncle and cousins, and the coldness of a marriage without affection. He admits he truly loved her, but declares that he's finally had enough. Without hesitation, he demands a divorce. Caught off guard by her husband's sudden firmness, Yahyao tries to regain control by using money as a weapon. She lashes out, warning that he'll walk away from the marriage with absolutely nothing. No Audi, no luxury apartment. But her attempt at manipulation fails miserably when he shows zero interest in her family's wealth or possessions. Consumed by anger after realizing she has lost control of the situation, the young woman agrees to the separation. She curses her grandfather's decision, calling him crazy for forcing her to marry a loser. Before ending the argument, she proudly boasts about her family's elite status, a first-class clan worth billions, while humiliating Yesun one last time, labeling him a broke nobody without a single dollar to his name. The divorce decision runs into one final obstacle, a family obligation. Yahyao reminds him that the following morning is her grandmother's 80th birthday celebration, an event that will gather the entire clan. Since their marriage had been arranged by the family elders, the divorce will also need to be discussed with them during the gathering. Yesun agrees without making things difficult, telling his soon-to-be ex-wife to settle everything with the family as soon as possible so he can sign the papers. As he walks toward the exit, Yahyao throws out one last insult, fully convinced that poverty will have him crawling back to her in less than 48 hours. The transformation begins the moment he steps onto the sidewalk. As soon as Yesun reaches the street, his phone rings with a notification. His ride is already waiting at the back corner. Turning the corner under heavy rain, the entire scene changes instantly. A flawless lineup of luxury cars stretches before him, each driver standing by at attention. The team leader, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit and dark sunglasses, rushes over with an umbrella to shield him from the rain. But the air brushes the gesture aside. Instead, he simply runs a hand through his soaked hair, letting the cold water clear his mind. After one of the assistants places a designer coat over his shoulders, Yesun gives a direct order to move out. The convoy of Rolls-Royces pulls away in perfect sync, their polished bodies gleaming beneath the city lights. The sight of the millionaire fleet catches every pedestrian off guard, leaving people staring in complete disbelief. From her apartment window, Yahyao watches the scene wide-eyed, trying to guess which powerful international figure had just arrived in the neighborhood, completely unaware that the man she had just thrown away was now standing at the top of the world. The heiress had no idea that the man she had just kicked out was the one commanding that elite fleet. The world might focus on famous financial dynasties, but the true peak of power belonged to the Ye clan, a strictly hidden organization whose secret wealth was beyond imagination. The price of power. Stepping out of the vehicle, Yesun walks toward an assistant waiting beside a helicopter. That authority didn't come easy. The Ye bloodline raised its successors through a ruthless selection system beginning at the age of 3, forcing them through endless training in martial arts, culture, and corporate management long before adulthood. Yesun's years trapped as a submissive son-in-law in the declining Wang family had merely been a character test designed by his grandfather. Back then, he willingly accepted the humiliation, driven by the spark he felt after first meeting the young woman. With the trial finally over, he is welcomed back by his subordinates as he gazes at the enormous illuminated palace that has once again become his official residence. The next morning, around 10 o'clock, the story shifts to the Wang family matriarch's birthday celebration inside a luxury residential estate. While the elderly woman receives congratulations from guests, the relatives begin openly mocking and questioning the whereabouts of the useless son-in-law. Embarrassed and cornered, Yahyao tries to hide the collapse of her marriage, falsely claiming that her husband disappeared because he got stuck at work. The banquet table turns into a nest of snakes. The cousins openly mock Yesun's delivery job, while the uncle labels him the family's greatest embarrassment, proudly bragging that while the young man spent his days riding a motorcycle carrying delivery bags, he drove around in a Maserati. Clutching her lapdog tightly, the elderly matriarch erupts in anger over Yesun's absence, demanding that someone drag him there immediately for such blatant disrespect. The smokescreen. Pressured with nowhere to run, Yahyao interrupts her grandmother with a bombshell announcement: the two are getting divorced. The elderly woman reacts badly, reminding everyone that the marriage had been a sacred order from her late grandfather. Refusing to become the center of scandal over her affair at the hotel, the young woman cruelly flips the narrative. She shifts all the blame onto her husband, making up a story that he abandoned her and had secretly been seeing another woman. The lie works. The birthday matriarch explodes in outrage, tearing into her son-in-law for supposedly betraying the family after spending 3 years living off them, eating, dressing, and driving on their dime. Yahyao pushes the performance even further, confessing to her aunts that she never slept with her husband, claiming she preserved her purity because he was too naive, and ended up falling for another woman. To the grandmother, betrayal is unforgivable and demands severe punishment under clan law. Following the matriarch's orders, Yahyao picks up her phone and calls the man who, on paper, is still her husband. On the other end, Yesin answers immediately, fully prepared for confrontation. The call lasts only seconds. The moment Yahyao relays her grandmother's demand that he show up at the party, he coldly refuses and hangs up. When the news reaches the matriarch, she explodes in fury in front of everyone, seeing the former son-in-law's behavior as an unforgivable insult. She orders people to drag him there by force. The cousin, spotting the perfect chance to humiliate and rough up his longtime target, volunteers for the job immediately. The family's real problem, however, lies elsewhere. The grandmother shifts focus to a growing business crisis. She reveals her concern over the sudden leadership change at Huasheng Corporation. Their real estate company has a pending $70 million financing deal waiting for approval from the company's mysterious new chairman, whose identity remains completely unknown in the market. Ironically, the all-powerful figure the family desperately wants to meet is, at that very moment, still wearing a dirty delivery uniform. Standing beside his helicopter, Yesin's right-hand man questions why his boss is still dressed in delivery rags. The heir has his reasons. He wants to finish one last day living as an ordinary guy, and revealing his empire too soon would put him directly in the sights of a deadly enemy. For now, moving in the shadows remains the smartest play, the street ambush. While making deliveries on his bike, Yesin's phone suddenly rings. It's the furious cousin, calling comfortably from inside his luxury car. He tracked the delivery route to Luyan residence and starts yelling through the phone, ordering the former son-in-law not to move an inch. Moments later, the luxury vehicle suddenly cuts across the road, cornering the delivery rider in the middle of the street, ready for a confrontation. Rolling down the window of the luxury car, the cousin gives an order. The former son-in-law must get in immediately and answer to the matriarch. Without even glancing at the spoiled rich kid, the delivery worker calmly states that the divorce decision is final, and the old woman's interference means absolutely nothing. Furious at the audacity, the rival reveals the real reason for the call. The grandmother wants to punish him severely under clan law. Bombarded with accusations of cheating and dishonoring the family, Yesin removes his helmet and immediately pieces everything together. His ex-wife had fabricated the ridiculous story to cover up her own mess. His reaction completely shatters the tension. He simply bursts into laughter. The nerve and shamelessness of his ex-wife are so absurd they're almost funny. The cousin is left completely confused by the reaction. In the blink of an eye, the former delivery driver's submissive attitude vanishes, replaced by an overwhelming aura and an icy stare, like a king looking down at an insect. Disturbed by the pressure but trying not to show weakness, the spoiled rich cousin screams for him to get in the car and kneel at the hotel to receive punishment and sign the divorce papers. His patience finally turns to dust. After yet another cold refusal, the villain completely loses control. He storms out of the car with clenched fists, hurling insults to force a physical fight. It proves to be a fatal mistake. The man who spent 3 years silently enduring abuse reacts at lightning speed. In one brutal motion, the former son-in-law unleashes a devastating kick straight to his opponent's face, sending him stumbling backward and leaving an instant swollen red mark across the spoiled rich kid's pale face. The spoiled rich kid crashes onto the asphalt, clutching his injured cheek and screaming in pain in the middle of the street. Blinded by rage, he curses his opponent, calling him trash and declaring that the clan's judgment will happen right there and now. He swears he'll destroy his rival's life. In one quick motion, the rich brat pulls out a sharp blade and charges recklessly, slashing wildly through the air. Yesin doesn't even blink. With surgical precision, he disarms the attacker in a single move, destroying any chance of resistance. The final knockout. Before the rival can even process what just happened, the former delivery driver lands a devastating punch that knocks the aggressor unconscious on the sidewalk. Humiliated and sprawled on the ground, the spoiled rich kid hears one final warning. Yesin makes it clear that nobody gets to make the rules for him anymore, and the family better understand once and for all that he is no longer some disposable toy they can push around. If they dare cross his path again, the price will be steep. Helmet back on, the heir turns around and walks away, leaving his rival screaming empty threats from the pavement. The story shifts back to the luxurious Wang Hotel, where the matriarch's celebration is still underway. The elderly woman is informed that her oldest grandson has just returned from the retrieval mission. Fully convinced the task had been successful, the old lady freezes in shock when she sees the young man step out of the vehicle, with his face completely battered and covered in dark bruises. In front of everyone, the young man immediately blames his cousin's useless ex-husband. The revelation hits the banquet hall like a bomb. Furious after seeing the family heir brutally beaten, the young man's father, Hang Sik, erupts in anger during the celebration, swearing to hunt down and destroy the delivery driver for daring to attack the clan. With his face completely swollen and distorted, the spoiled rich kid cries in front of the matriarch, begging her to call the authorities and throw his attacker in jail. Horrified by her grandson's condition, the old woman looks away but refuses the request. Bringing the police into it would spark scandal and gossip around the clan's name. Instead, the grandmother gives a ruthless order to her son: call in underworld enforcers to break the former son-in-law and drag him back to the banquet hall. The ambush near the apartment complex. 30 minutes later, Yesin approaches Juan residence to finish his route when two massive thugs block his path. After confirming he's the delivery rider they were sent for, the criminals flash sadistic grins and demand that he come with them without resistance. Realizing immediately that the thugs were sent by the Wang family, the young man calmly says he's not going anywhere because he still has deliveries to finish. That answer becomes the trigger for violence, as the thugs rush forward, promising to crush his arms before any conversation happens. The Thug Massacre. The fight explodes in the middle of the street with heavy punches and bones cracking, but the outcome is completely one-sided. Yesin dodges effortlessly and counters with pinpoint precision, knocking out the first giant without taking a single scratch. Dusting off his jacket, he casually checks to make sure the customer's order is still in perfect condition. Suddenly, the second thug, already staggering with a torn shirt, launches a desperate sneak attack from behind. Without even looking back, the heir delivers a brutal heel strike that slams the attacker straight into the pavement. During the motion, the delivery bag containing a sack of rice nearly slips from his hands, but Yesin catches it mid-air with flawless reflexes. Glancing back at the two mercenaries sprawled across the asphalt groaning in pain, he adjusts the package and calmly continues on his way, completely indifferent to the threat. While Ichin speeds through the streets on his motorcycle to finish his final delivery of the night, tension rises behind the scenes at Wango Hotel. Chikao has just dropped a bombshell on Grandma Hang. Ichin single-handedly destroyed a group of mercenaries. The elderly woman is left completely speechless. The protagonist's reputation in the area is bizarre. Everyone knows the guy is basically a martial arts monster, but since nobody can truly control him, the label of useless son-in-law somehow still sticks to him. The atmosphere shifts with the arrival of Makun, the regional general manager of Tuan Tuan Delivery Service in Yunchao. Sensing an opportunity, the old woman's son immediately poisons the executive's ear, revealing that the visitor happens to be Ichin's direct boss. Right then and there, a plan begins forming to publicly ruin the hero. Makun enters the venue with a warm smile, showing off his charm. Knowing the matriarch's weak spot, he presents her with a premium bottle of wine and a carefully selected book. After receiving the gifts, the elderly woman forces out a dramatic, sorrowful tone. The businessman takes the bait and asks what's wrong, only to hear a manipulative sob story about a supposed family tragedy, threats, and tension. That's Chikao's cue to step in. He corners Makun and drags Ichin's reputation through the mud, fabricating lies that the young man cheated on his wife and brutally assaulted the family's grandson. The matriarch strengthens the performance, complaining that the only reason she hasn't already taught the ungrateful brat a lesson is because she lacks powerful connections in the city. The twist comes when the truth about the young man's job reaches the executive. The moment Makun realizes exactly which employee they're talking about, his world practically collapses. The shock is immediate. Visibly disturbed by the terrifying possibility of having that monster on his payroll, the businessman abruptly drops the act and demands a private conversation with Chikao behind closed doors. After hanging up with Xiaowai and ordering a full trace on Ichen's whereabouts, Makun sets up a strategic delivery request at the Wanhao Grand Hotel. 15 minutes later, the protagonist rides through the streets on his motorcycle, completely unaware of the trap waiting for him. A man identifying himself as Mr. Ma calls Ichin and tells him to stop at the entrance of Wango Hotel to complete the order, placing the target exactly where the ruthless Grandma Hang and her allies wanted him. Knowing delivery workers are usually blocked from entering the hotel's grand hall and suspecting his relatives are inside, Ichin follows protocol and asks the customer to come downstairs to pick up the package. That's when the trap finally closes. Under Grandma Hang's cynical gaze, Makun orders the young man to wait at the entrance and begins the public humiliation. Calling Mrs. Huang over, The businessman storms forward and loudly demands that Ishin take off his uniform and hand over his employee badge immediately. The hero stands frozen for a moment, completely stunned, finding the man's behavior ridiculous and unable to understand the sudden outburst. To tighten the pressure even further, Xiaowai points directly at the man and reveals that he is none other than Makun, the regional boss of Tuan Tuan in Yunchao. The ultimatum is clear. If Ichin dares question the executive's authority, the very manager who hired him will be called in to destroy his career. Ichin's phone rings immediately. On the other end, his manager is in full panic mode, unable to understand how he could possibly have offended the mighty President Ma. For the protagonist, who had already planned to walk away from his delivery job, seeing his superior crumble under pressure becomes the final push he needs. Following Makun's order to hand over the uniform, Ichin calmly begins unbuttoning his work jacket. The businessman keeps pressing, demanding that he remove every piece of company clothing. Watching the scene unfold, Xiaowai, still recovering from the bruises he received after getting beaten by the protagonist, mocks him mercilessly, saying the hero now looks like a cornered dog and taunting him to see whether he can still act tough. As he removes the uniform, Ichin suddenly drops a psychological bomb, casually asking Makun about the expiration of his Tuan Tuan representation contract, which is supposed to end later that year. The executive freezes, visibly shaken by how much information the young man somehow knows. With a slight smirk, the protagonist tells him not to bother traveling to the capital to negotiate an extension because the renewal is already dead. Makun completely loses it, yelling that some low-level delivery worker has absolutely no authority and bragging about his direct connections with the company's top executives. Taking advantage of the chaos, Grandma Hang suddenly steps in, loudly ordering her granddaughter's husband to kneel in front of all the guests. The elderly woman throws his supposed betrayal of Jiayao and the assault on her grandson back in his face, declaring that the family's harsh clan rules will be carried out against the scoundrel right there on the spot. Ichin simply smiles at the matriarch's delusion. He questions why he should lower himself and reminds everyone of the agreement made 3 years earlier when he joined the Hang family, including the consequences for anyone who violated the family rules. Blinded by pride, the old woman immediately demands the punishment be enforced to crush him once and for all. With one hand resting on his chest, Ichin stands firm, speaking with the same unwavering authority as always, refusing to back down even an inch. Grandma Hang reacts instantly, ordering Chikiao to retrieve the family's punishment relic, the feared dragon staff. Panic spreads through the room because everyone knows the object's terrifying reputation, powerful enough to leave faces disfigured and unbearable pain lasting for days. The old woman announces a punishment of 20 strikes across the young man's face. Determined to settle things personally, Jia Yao's father volunteers to carry out the punishment, claiming he wants to teach the son-in-law he supposedly raised a proper lesson. The situation takes another turn when Jia Yao herself suddenly enters the scene. Snatching the staff away, she demands the right to punish her husband personally. Ichin watches in disbelief as she throws out one false accusation after another, forcing him to sit through a speech about how she's supposedly the perfect wife of the century. According to her, allowing other people to beat her husband inside her family's property would damage her own reputation. Tired of the endless talking, Xiaowai ignores the woman entirely, snatches the dragon staff, and launches the final attack himself. Still consumed by bitterness after his previous defeat, he charges toward Ichin with the clear intention of smashing his face in with the promised 20 strikes, but the hero is far too fast. Reading the attack instantly, Ichin blocks the strike effortlessly and shuts down the rival's arrogance with one devastating punch straight to the face. The impact completely wrecks his opponent's face, handing the rival his second humiliating defeat against the protagonist. The party guests stand in total shock after watching the family's legitimate heir get knocked unconscious right in the middle of the banquet hall. Furious at the audacity, the birthday matriarch screams that the place is packed with powerful officials and influential executives, threatening to have Ichin arrested immediately. Without hesitation, the protagonist fires back that he acted in self-defense, since everyone there clearly witnessed the man charging at him with a weapon. In the middle of the uproar, a mustached man tries to corner Ichin, calling him a hypocrite and demanding he honor his obligations. Staring directly at the crowd, Ichin calmly states that he will accept any punishment, but only if he is actually guilty of something. Supporting her injured grandson, the matriarch immediately throws out new accusations, claiming Ichin secretly keeps a mistress and beats family members. That becomes the opening for the massive plot twist. The protagonist finally lays the truth on the table, revealing that while he remained loyal for 3 years, his wife was actually the one cheating. He exposes the fact that Jia Yao rented a room at Yahello Hotel the previous day alongside Fan Chao, challenging everyone to check the hotel records if they don't believe him. The banquet hall instantly erupts into gossip after hearing the name Chao, the second son of the powerful Fang family. The rumors about Jia Yao's supposed purity collapse on the spot. Desperate after getting exposed, the wife begs her grandmother to ignore the accusation, claiming the hotel meeting was nothing more than a business discussion. Ichin immediately mocks the excuse, sarcastically asking what kind of business meeting happens inside a hotel room while wearing bathrobes. At the exact peak of the tension, the guests suddenly turn around, only to come face to face with Fan Chao himself walking into the room. Holding a birthday gift for the matriarch, Fan Chao looks around the chaos completely confused. Jia Yao immediately seizes the opportunity, trying to flip the situation back in her favor by claiming Ichin made up the affair and begging Chao to confirm that their hotel meeting was only business-related. Realizing the protagonist is trying to expose them, Chao downplays the situation in front of everyone, insisting the woman had only gone there to drop off paperwork. The wealthy heir openly challenges Ichin to produce photos or videos proving any cheating happened, sarcastically adding that the woman never even answered the hotel room phone. To completely destroy the hero's credibility, Chao claims the whole thing is nothing more than slander from a bitter, frustrated employee. He reveals to everyone that Ichin was actually the delivery driver who brought food to their hotel room the day before. Lying through his teeth, Chao claims the young man was so clumsy and rude that he dropped the delivery bag onto the floor, forcing him to leave a terrible review and file an official complaint through the app. Spotting Ma Kun in the crowd, the heir asks the executive to pull up the delivery history on his phone. Taking the bait, the businessman immediately checks the report and publicly confirms the terrible customer rating and supposedly awful behavior of the employee. The entire banquet hall turns against Ichin, mocking him as jealous, pathetic, and low-class for supposedly trying to get revenge over a bad delivery rating. Locking eyes with his wife, the protagonist demands that she tell everyone the real reason the food ended up on the floor. Standing close to her lover, Jia Yao shamelessly blames her husband's supposed incompetence, openly mocking the shock and desperation he felt after catching them together inside the hotel room. Hearing her laugh at his emotional breakdown, Ichin lets out a cold, sarcastic laugh of his own and begins questioning whether anyone in that room truly understands the future they're gambling with. Ichin turns directly toward Grandma Hang and demands to know whether she has a single piece of actual evidence supporting the fake story about the mistress they invented for him. Cornered by the question, the elderly woman glances helplessly between her granddaughter and the Fan family heir, completely speechless. With no way out, the matriarch quickly tries to bury the cheating scandal and shifts the conversation, swearing that the hero will still pay for beating her grandson Xiao Wai. Ichin remains completely calm, immediately firing back that the rival attacked him with a blade. That surveillance footage clearly captured everything as self-defense, and that if she really wants, he can call the police himself and settle the matter right there. The old woman completely loses it over his audacity, throwing his 3 years under the Hang family's roof back in his face and accusing him of being an ungrateful parasite now trying to bite the hand that fed him. Keeping his composure, Ichin calmly states that he always respected the elderly woman and guarantees he will only touch her grandson again if he is attacked first. Then he gets straight to the point and makes a single request: her approval to finalize the divorce with Jia Yao once and for all. The birthday matriarch immediately uses the moment to perform for the guests, giving a dramatic speech about how the marriage only happened 3 years earlier to honor the dying wish of her late husband, who had taken the young man in. Playing the victim, she claims she rejected every divorce request from Jia Yao's parents out of respect for the deceased patriarch, forcing her granddaughter, considered the greatest beauty in the region, to suffer through poverty because of him. To close out the performance, the old woman officially declares that after attacking her grandson and insulting Jia Yao and the Fan family's ally, Ichin is permanently expelled from the clan and no longer recognized as a son-in-law. Taking advantage of the dramatic moment, Chikiao orders the waiters to pour wine for everyone so the guests can celebrate finally getting rid of him. One by one, glasses are raised across the hall in a toast honoring the matriarch's decision. The divorce announcement is treated like a grand prize. With Jia Yao finally free from what everyone calls trash, the expectation is that she'll now find a man worthy of her status. Taking center stage, the girl's mother, Sulan, thanks the guests before casually dropping an intimate bombshell. The marriage was never consummated. She proudly reveals that in 3 entire years, Ishan never even touched her daughter's hand. Jiayao nearly dies of embarrassment over her mother's loose tongue, while the businessmen and executives in the hall visibly perk up after discovering the young woman supposedly remains pure. Holding a wine glass, Ekin watches the entire circus unfold in disgust. It becomes painfully obvious to him that his ex-wife is nothing more than a trophy being auctioned off by her own family to the highest bidder. Dripping with sarcasm, he congratulates her on finally being free to chase the wealthy husband she always dreamed of. Looking down at him with superiority, Jiayao makes one final humiliating offer. If he kneels and begs for mercy, she'll convince her grandmother to spare his job. A cold smile spreads across the hero's face. Outraged that the woman who just betrayed him would dare ask him to crawl, Ichin makes a dramatic move. Looking straight into his ex-wife's eyes, he slowly pours his entire glass of wine onto the floor, making it crystal clear that she is not worthy of even a toast from him, let alone his submission. Jia Yao's blood boils instantly. She explodes, calling him a pathetic peasant and a lunatic. Together with Xiaowai, she begs the grandmother to cancel the simple expulsion, arguing that throwing the delivery driver out is far too light a punishment for someone so arrogant. The elderly matriarch smiles coldly and reassures her grandchildren that the clan will never let such an insult go unpunished. Addressing the elite figures of Yunqiao, she declares that Ichin stole her granddaughter's youth and crippled her heir. To preserve the family's honor, the old woman rallies the city's most powerful figures for an all-out attack. The new goal is to completely destroy the protagonist's life from every possible angle. The matriarch gives the order to ruin Ichin financially, swearing he won't have enough money left to buy bread anywhere in the city. The boycott gains momentum immediately among the wealthy elites attending the event. Fan Chao, radiating arrogance, is the first to throw the full weight of his clan behind the effort. As heir to a massive hotel empire, he officially bans the protagonist from every hotel in Yunqiao. The rich heir's goal is obvious. Not only does he want the rival's wife, but he also wants to see the former delivery driver crawling through the dirt just to survive. The domino effect begins immediately. Sui, a food industry tycoon with 2 decades of market control, pulls strings to block the young man from finding any restaurant work. Makun, the logistics executive, joins the attack and guarantees that every door in the delivery industry will remain permanently shut to him. To eliminate even more basic options, Jinan, director of a local TV network, uses his influence to prevent Ichin from finding work at bars and karaoke businesses. Watching the city's elite practically twist themselves trying to crush him, Ichin remains perfectly calm. Looking at all of them without the slightest concern, he simply asks, with total indifference, whether this is really the best they can do. Remembering the brutal beating he suffered, Xiaowai suddenly panics. He warns the rich elites about his former brother-in-law's terrifying combat skills and begs them to extend the boycott into private security, terrified that some billionaire might hire the hero as a bodyguard. The guests hesitate, reluctantly admitting the plan has holes since it's impossible to control the hiring decisions of every wealthy family in the region. It's at that exact moment of uncertainty that the atmosphere in the banquet hall completely changes. Out of nowhere, a mysterious young woman with an overwhelming presence enters the room, instantly capturing everyone's attention. Nobody has the slightest idea who the newcomer is. No one in the hall can figure out exactly when the mysterious woman even walked through the door. The stunned silence is broken by Fan Chao, who suddenly snaps out of his trance with fascination shining in his eyes. He rushes over to greet her, showering her with compliments for the unexpected visit and apologizing for not preparing a proper welcome, clearly mesmerized by her beauty. Standing nearby, Maka nudges his ally and quietly asks who the woman is, admitting that despite running Tuan across the region, he has never seen her before. Chikiao finally reveals the night's ultimate game-changer. The woman is Qin Hongyan, the all-powerful vice president of the legendary Hashen Corporation. Ekin watches the entire scene in complete silence. The executive's reputation is absolutely overwhelming. Even though very few people actually knew what she looked like due to her private nature, everyone knew she handled billion-dollar deals and wielded terrifying influence, answering only to the president of the corporation. Looking more closely, something suddenly clicks in Ichin's mind as he realizes that the woman standing there actually works for his own organization. If the Hang family had connections with much of the city's elite, Qin Hongyan practically held the entire city in the palm of her hand. Still trying to flatter her, Makun makes an inappropriate comment about how any wealthy man would kill to have a woman like her. With razor-sharp sarcasm, the executive immediately fires back, leaving the businessman stammering and apologizing in panic under the pressure of her overwhelming presence. Seizing the opportunity, Chikiao plays his final card and begs her to use Hashin Corporation's influence to erase Ichin from the market, reminding her of the massive bribes and favors their family had already offered while trying to secure a $70 million investment deal. Chin Hongyan completely ignores the plea. Without the slightest expression, she calmly pulls a cigarette from her purse. In what feels like a choreographed performance, 4 of the most influential men in the room rush forward, desperately flicking open their lighters to please her. The vice president elegantly settles into the sofa, watching the lined-up tycoons in front of her like servants waiting for approval. That's when she completely breaks the room's expectations. Ignoring the elite practically kneeling at her feet, she locks eyes with Ichin and, in a surprisingly soft voice, asks the young delivery driver to step forward and light her cigarette. The entire banquet hall freezes. Watching the most powerful woman in the city ignore 4 wealthy executives with lighters just to focus on a delivery worker leaves everyone speechless. Ichin calmly walks toward her, hands still tucked into his pockets, completely ignoring the cigarette since he has no lighter on him. The crowd watches in disbelief, already judging him for supposedly lacking the manners to borrow a lighter from the wealthy men and assist the executive. Instead of getting angry, Chin Hongyan rises from her seat and walks straight toward him. In a calm but focused tone, she demands to know his full name. Before the protagonist can even answer, Grandma Hang's son suddenly starts shouting, insulting Ichin and demanding that he lower his head and stop disrespecting the billionaire executive. The vice president silences the sycophant with a single hand gesture. Then she completely shatters every bit of protocol, gently placing her hand on Ichin's shoulder. She looks at him with an intensity so strong that many in the room could swear it resembles affection. Then comes the move that flips the entire game upside down. She says she's willing to give him a chance to survive, joking that he has a striking presence and just so happens to share the same last name as the mysterious new president of the corporation. She then offers him a position as her personal bodyguard, asking for nothing more than loyalty in return. The room instantly erupts into whispers. None of the influential women present can understand why someone as refined and powerful as her would risk protecting a so-called useless man. Meanwhile, Jiayao watches from the sidelines, boiling with jealousy and confusion, unable to understand why the executive suddenly seems so interested in her still husband, trying to hide their nervousness while obsessing over the clue involving the mysterious president's surname. The Hang family begins pressing Chin Hongyan for more details. The vice president smoothly dodges the questions, claiming the corporation's new leader values total secrecy and prefers to operate from the shadows, conveniently leaving out the fact that even she supposedly lacks access to his full identity. But Ichin reads the situation instantly. He knows she has already figured everything out. A woman like Chin Hongyan would never lower herself to asking a random delivery driver for a light unless she already knew exactly who he was. The price for Ichin to walk away safely came with complete humiliation. Vice President Shin Hongyan suddenly laid out her condition. He would have to kneel and beg for forgiveness in front of Mrs. Wang and Shaoi. Then she drops an offer that leaves everyone stunned, a personal bodyguard position paying an annual salary of 200,000. To everyone in the room, it sounds like an unbelievable prize, and they eagerly wait to watch the man accept the chance to serve such a powerful woman. As Yahyao watches the scene in disbelief, Grandma Hong finally gives her warning. She explains that Shin is a ruthless strategist who climbed the corporate ladder by manipulating and controlling powerful men. But Shin's plan immediately falls apart. To the complete shock of the hall, Ichin rejects the offer without a second thought. Completely stunned by the audacity, the vice president demands that he repeat himself. His reaction is brutal and completely unexpected. Ichin steps forward, grabs Shin by the ear, and loudly repeats his refusal right in front of her face. Pain and humiliation immediately spread across the executive's expression, while the audience watches in utter disbelief at what looks like outrageous disrespect toward one of the city's most untouchable authorities. Shin retaliates instantly. Consumed by anger, she announces a complete boycott. Ichin will no longer be allowed to find opportunities anywhere in the city. The crowd wastes no time mocking the failure, who supposedly just destroyed his own future. Even Yahyao turns against him, blaming him for throwing away the only lifeline he had left. When someone asks whether the punishment is personal or corporate, Shin makes herself crystal clear. Ichin is finished on every front. The tension rises even further when someone questions Shin Hongyang's authority. According to them, a mere vice president should not have the power to issue orders on behalf of the corporation. What nobody realizes is that the true owner of everything, Ye Chen himself, is standing there in plain sight, quietly watching the chaos unfold while protecting his anonymity. To maintain the lie and shield the identity of the real boss, a shocking story suddenly emerges. Shin claims to be the mysterious new president's lover. The sheer boldness of the lie catches even Ye Chen off guard. She commits to the story so confidently that even he is left speechless. Meanwhile, the Wang family quietly celebrates, seeing the rumored relationship as a golden opportunity to profit. Amid shady negotiations and under-the-table deals totaling 70 million, Shin continues selling the narrative. She describes her so-called boyfriend as a serious man who never mixes pleasure with business, using that excuse to explain why nobody has ever seen them together publicly. Ye Chen immediately understands the move. She is cornered, desperate, and improvising an entire story on the spot just to avoid being exposed. The silence is finally shattered by Ye Chen's sudden laughter. Confused and clearly not understanding the mockery, the vice president decides to push her fantasy even further. She boldly claims that the powerful president became completely mesmerized by her beauty the very first time they met. According to her dramatic story, the billionaire even rented out a private island to organize a luxurious ceremony, desperately begging her to accept his heart. Ignoring the woman's fantasy completely, Ye Chen gets straight to the point. He demands that Huang Jiayao accompany him to the courthouse immediately so they can finally sign the divorce papers. The family, however, has no intention of ending the drama so soon. Xiao suggests leaving the divorce until after the banquet, secretly planning to humiliate the young man by serving his food in a bowl near the entrance like a stray dog before throwing him out of the city for good. Xiao grows increasingly excited and even thanks Ma Kun for forcing Ye Chen to pack up his things. Feeling superior, the company representative smugly admits he almost regrets not recording the rival's downfall. That mockery becomes the final trigger. Ye Chen decides Ma Kun needs to be dealt with. Without hesitation, he makes a phone call that instantly shifts the balance of power. He contacts Wu Xiaohong, the CEO of Tuan Tuan. Wasting no time, Ye Chen directly orders the executive to fire the regional representative in Juneau immediately. On the other end of the call, the billionaire, who has long dreamed of meeting the mysterious man behind the $500 billion empire, obeys without hesitation. They even arrange to meet later at the banquet itself. While Ma Kun's fate is quietly being sealed, he and the women nearby continue watching everything with open contempt. Zai laughs at Ye Chen's commands, convinced the entire thing is nothing more than a desperate bluff. Completely underestimating his opponent, Ma Kun dismisses the threat as fairy tale nonsense, still viewing Ye Chen as nothing more than a pitiful nobody. Ma Kun eventually loses patience and even insults Ye Chen's grandfather, calling him a country bumpkin while mocking the absurd idea that someone like President Wu, a billionaire, would ever associate with people from that level of society. Jia Yao joins in without hesitation, treating her own husband like disposable trash, while the vice president of Juashan silently watches the entire situation unfold without saying a word. Then comes the turning point. A phone suddenly rings. It's President Wu. Ma Kun answers confidently, fully expecting to hear confirmation of his contract renewal, only to receive a devastating blow instead. His license as regional representative has been revoked immediately. Panic instantly sets in. Desperate to save face in front of everyone, he pretends the conversation is positive, casually bringing up partnerships and $8 million figures to hide the disaster unfolding in real time. Even while his boss shouts through the phone that money changes nothing and that he's being replaced immediately, Ma Kun keeps nodding and pretending the conversation is about success and future opportunities. Ye Chen watches the entire act in silence, calmly enjoying the masked desperation of his rival. Completely unaware of Ma Kun's collapse, she even proposes a celebratory toast for the supposed contract extension. Cornered and barely able to speak, the man awkwardly accepts congratulations for a position he literally no longer holds. Eventually, Ma Kun can't stop himself from tearing up. Confused, Xiao assumes he's simply emotional, but the businessman quickly blames the strong alcohol to cover himself. Ye Chen instantly sees through the act and casually suggests he stop lying and admit that he just lost his job. Trying to salvage what little pride remains, Ma Kun hurriedly invents a story, claiming his departure is merely part of a new global corporate strategy, definitely not because of some delivery driver's phone call. Ye Chen simply smiles quietly, satisfied at how cleanly he just removed one of his enemies. As some guests begin nervously glancing toward Ye Chen, Jiayao's mother quickly kills the tension, reassuring everyone that her son-in-law is still just a useless failure with no real connections to powerful people. The Huang family eagerly joins in, bringing up the humiliating 3 years he spent living as a dependent. The final humiliation comes moments later when 2 men grab Ma Kun by the arms to escort him out. Clutching an expensive bottle of wine like a lifeline, the disgraced executive desperately begs for another chance while being dragged away. Watching the pathetic scene unfold, Ye Chen finally confirms what he had already suspected. His wife's love was purely tied to money. With that realization, the chapter quietly shifts as the banquet finally begins. The hosts officially start the event, guiding guests toward tables packed with expensive appetizers. In a cold tone, Huan Jiayao orders her husband to hurry up and eat so they can finalize the divorce without ruining her grandmother's birthday celebration. Ye Chen accepts the condition without complaint, calmly beginning his meal while waiting for his freedom. His mere presence, however, continues to irritate the guests. One woman openly shows disgust, treating him like someone beneath basic respect and acting as if even the silverware he touched had somehow become contaminated. The atmosphere grows heavier when Ye Chen casually makes a sarcastic comment about the papaya on his plate, joking that the fruit might be good for the woman's health. Deeply offended by both the implication and his lack of respect, she snaps back rudely. He simply shrugs and says he'll serve her some soup later, completely unfazed by her arrogance. Watching the exchange, the birthday woman's granddaughter demands that Grandma ban Ye Chen from sitting at the table entirely, arguing that someone who didn't even bring a gift has no right to be there. The matriarch, however, sticks to her decision to wait until after dinner before finalizing the divorce. While surrounded by contemptuous stares, Ye Chen quietly thanks the family's stubbornness in his mind because delaying things helps him complete his secret mission. Then he suddenly drops a surprise. Despite all the criticism, he calmly announces that he actually did bring a birthday gift and asks Jiayao to hand it over to Wang Hou. His wife stares at him with complete disgust, convinced the item is nothing more than some worthless trinket. Terrified of embarrassing herself in front of the guests, she demands that he put the package away, trying to stop her husband's ridiculousness from damaging her reputation. Jiayao keeps yelling from across the banquet hall, furious that Ye Chen remains focused on eating and completely ignores her demands to provide a proper gift. But her tantrum suddenly stops mattering 10 minutes later. The entire party's attention is stolen by an unexpected arrival. A delivery driver suddenly appears in the hotel lobby. After being temporarily stopped by security due to the Heng family's private event, the rider eventually reaches the front entrance, claiming he has a special delivery. Xiao approaches with visible irritation over the interruption, but her superiority instantly crumbles the moment the delivery man explains where the package came from. The sender, he says, was a mysterious man arriving in a Rolls-Royce. The mere mention of the luxury car sends the family into a frenzy. The package is immediately opened, and what's inside silences the entire room. A flawless, icy jade bracelet, pure, crystal clear, and completely without imperfections. The glow of the stone and the impossible quality of the craftsmanship leave everyone speechless as experts on the spot immediately estimate its value at no less than $10 million. The banquet hall erupts into complete chaos. The guests are stunned by the sheer audacity of a billionaire trusting such an outrageous fortune to nothing more than an ordinary delivery driver. In no time, people swarm around the birthday matriarch, demanding to know the identity of the mysterious, powerful figure behind the gift. Completely confused, the elderly woman admits she has absolutely no idea who the sender is. While the elite crowd practically drools over the jade bracelet and debates which hidden billionaire could possibly be responsible, Ye Chen remains quietly seated in his corner, casually eating appetizers in complete silence. Vanity takes over the Wang family almost instantly. Ignoring all logic, they collectively convince themselves that the priceless gift must have come from a secret admirer hopelessly in love with Huang Yuan. Since the 20-year-old girl has millions of followers online, the idea of some billionaire fan obsessing over her suddenly sounds perfectly reasonable. The delusion spreads so fast that guests are already congratulating President Huang on his supposedly wealthy future son-in-law. From his corner, Ye Chen simply watches the entire scene with quiet disgust. To him, it is genuinely pathetic watching the family invent an imaginary suitor, rather than admit that the so-called useless dependent they despise could actually be the real sender. Cutting straight through the flattering fantasy, Ye Chen turns directly to Jiayao. After confirming that she has finished eating, he calmly announces that his responsibility there is complete. The matriarch's birthday gift has already been delivered, so now it is finally time to head to the courthouse and sign the divorce papers. Confused, Jiao demands to know what gift he is even talking about. Ye Chen silently points toward the icy jade bracelet. The revelation lands like a bomb, but instead of shock, the room erupts into blind fury. The humiliation, relatives completely lose their minds, screaming that a failure like him could never afford jewelry of that caliber, even if he lived 3 lifetimes. The accusation? Everyone immediately accuses him of shamelessly stealing credit from Yuan Yuan's supposed rich admirer, just to make himself look important. The disgust, completely revolted by what she sees as a pathetic lie, Jiao demands that the divorce be finalized immediately so she never has to look at him again. Completely unfazed by the shouting and insults, Ye Chen calmly turns toward the elderly Mrs. Hang. Before leaving, he makes sure to leave one final reminder about the 3 years of loyalty, patience, and submission he gave to that family. His revelation about the $10 million bracelet only fuels an even bigger meltdown. Blinded by prejudice, his mother-in-law demands he stop the performance and disappear immediately, treating him like a walking embarrassment who does not even deserve to breathe the same air as the Wang family. Soji goes even further, insisting that once the divorce is finalized, he should take the first train out of town and never show his face in Yunchu again. Ye Chen never bends. Walking toward the exit, he makes one thing perfectly clear. Nobody there has the authority to dictate his future or decide where he belongs. Outside the hotel, the contrast could not be sharper. While Fang Chao mocks him from inside a luxury car, joking that the young man probably cannot even afford anything more than a rental bicycle now, Ye Chen completely ignores the ridicule. Instead, he steps into a regular taxi with only one goal in mind, finishing the process at the Civil Affairs office. Inside, the sound of printers marks the end of an entire chapter of his life. Holding the finalized divorce certificate in his hands, Ye Chen feels the weight of 3 miserable years finally lift from his shoulders. He is no longer the dependent son-in-law. Now free from the Huang family's toxicity and manipulation, he is ready to fully focus on reclaiming his future, leaving every ounce of resentment behind. But the X family refuses to let things end peacefully. Outside, Jiao continues yelling insults, calling him worthless trash as his taxi pulls away. Consumed by equal parts curiosity and bitterness, she orders Fang Chao to follow the car, determined to make sure the so-called loser is really leaving the city for good. Convinced Ye Chen has no money and nowhere left to go, Chao accelerates confidently, fully expecting the rival to end up at the train station. But the chase quickly takes an unexpected turn. The taxi suddenly veers away from the obvious route. Confused, Jia Yao initially assumes he must be heading toward the airport, but Fang Chao quickly notices something strange. The route is leading toward West Lake. The couple follows without realizing they are not chasing a man running away. They are following someone finally stepping back into the life that always belonged to him. Driving through the city streets, Chao remains fully convinced the rival will end up in the cheapest motel imaginable. After all, he had already used his influence to make sure the guy would be rejected from every low-end hotel in town. Then comes the shock. 10 minutes later, Ye Chen steps out of a taxi directly in front of the luxurious Four Seasons by West Lake. Four Seasons, Hotel Hangzhou, at West Lake. Watching him walk up the grand staircase, the couple instantly assumes he must be there begging for a waiter job and starts laughing. Jiao remembers how her relatives had already warned her ex-husband that he would struggle to find work even as a janitor, yet he ignored every warning. Consumed by bitterness, Chao immediately calls the hotel manager, demanding that the intruder be kicked out as quickly as possible. Then the mood suddenly changes. Chao's expression freezes mid-call, instantly alarming Jiao. The manager reveals something completely unexpected. The man is not there looking for work. Faced with the mystery, Chao briefly considers the impossible, that the rival might actually be staying there as a guest. Jiao dismisses the idea instantly. One night there costs over 8,000. And during the divorce she personally confiscated all his cards, leaving him with almost no credit and barely any cash. Determined to figure out what is really happening, the couple storms into the main lobby. That is when the employee delivers the devastating truth. Ye Chen was never looking for a job. He had just prepaid for 7 nights, more than 50,000 paid upfront in a single transaction. The arrogant couple is left completely speechless as the entire situation flips upside down. The impact of that amount hits instantly. Chao immediately accuses the rival of theft, and Yao agrees without hesitation, convinced her ex had been secretly stealing grocery money and even dog food funds behind the scenes. But the real blow to their pride comes straight from the front desk. Yechin did not book just any room. He reserved the presidential suite. The information lands like a nuclear bomb on the couple. Knowing that a single night in that luxury suite costs $80,000, Chow quickly does the math and realizes the total bill has already passed $560,000. Completely unable to process it, he turns to his girlfriend and sarcastically asks whether someone could really save $500,000 just by cutting corners on dog food. The receptionist calmly confirms the massive payment and casually adds that the man even left an enormous tip. That is enough to completely send Yahyao over the edge. Right there in the hotel lobby, she starts screaming at employees, accusing the establishment of knowingly accepting stolen money from her family. Embarrassed by the scene, Chow drags her away and tries to think rationally. There is no possible way someone could save up that kind of money from grocery leftovers. Then Yahyao suddenly connects the dots. She remembers how her ex always lingered around her grandmother's house, constantly using the excuse of taking care of the family dog. To her, the answer becomes obvious. He must have stolen the elderly woman's priceless antiques and sold them. Panicking over what could be an enormous loss, Chow immediately orders her to check the family's valuables, forcing the young woman to hurriedly pull out her phone. Meanwhile, the matriarch Hang's 80th birthday celebration continues at another luxurious hotel across the city. Among the elite guests, powerful figures like President Teng remain eagerly waiting for the mysterious individual connected to the priceless jade bracelet. Vice President Chin Hongyan taps her fingers impatiently against the table. She refuses to leave before seeing the mysterious billionaire behind the gift, yet the man still has not appeared. The vice director of Washing Corporation suggests that despite the terrible traffic around CG Lake Road, the guest should have arrived by now. At that moment, the executive suddenly connects the dots to Yechin, remembering that he had been the only one to personally deliver the jade bracelet. Then chaos interrupts the banquet. Yechin's ex-mother-in-law suddenly answers a phone call from her daughter. On the other side, Yahyao urgently demands that her mother rush to Grandma's mansion and inspect all the paintings and antiques, accusing her ex-husband of stealing and selling priceless family treasures. The woman lets out a stunned scream, unable to believe the young man would dare rob the matriarch herself. Watching the commotion unfold, Hongyan lights a cigarette with visible disappointment. For a brief moment, she had almost considered the young man important. Now, she concludes, he is probably nothing more than an ordinary thief. Without wasting another second, she politely says goodbye to the elderly Mrs. Hang and heads for the exit. The birthday matriarch and her son Sikiao personally escort her to the car, still hopeful that future business funding might come their way. With the executive gone, the rest of the wealthy guests slowly begin leaving as well, giving up on meeting the mysterious man behind the luxury bracelet. Back in the lobby, the elderly matriarch finally demands answers about the theft rumors. Her daughter quickly repeats everything Yahyao reported. The young man allegedly spent nearly $600,000 on the presidential suite, money her granddaughter insists must have come from stolen family assets. The old woman explodes with fury, still clinging to a tiny bit of hope about her elite guest, while refusing to let the useless parasite ruin her celebration. She immediately sends a group of relatives to inspect the family mansion. Not long after, the group arrives at Sion Villa, ready to tear the place apart. The search team splits up. One relative inspects the priceless collection of relics, while another thoroughly checks the main bedroom. 20 minutes later, the conclusion seems obvious. The safe is untouched. Everything remains exactly where it belongs. There is not a single piece of evidence proving Yechin stole anything. That is when the plan changes. Wanting to frame him, the nephew pretends to do one final inspection. Sneaking into the room alone, he quietly steals the family's most valuable possession, an ultra-rare Richard Mille watch inherited from the late grandfather, one of only 48 models in existence, valued at over $5 million. With the watch hidden in his pocket, the schemer runs back in and pretends to panic over the object's sudden disappearance. The sight of the empty case sends the family into complete hysteria. To them, this is now undeniable proof that the young man stole family assets to fund his luxury lifestyle. The news reaches Grandma Hang almost immediately. The elderly matriarch completely loses control. Enraged, she orders the rival to be captured at once and demands brutal punishment. Drag him back immediately. Cut off his hands. The mission is handed to the uncle, but the cowardly nephew suddenly loses all enthusiasm. Remembering very well the terrifying punch Yechin once landed on him, he instinctively grabs his bruised cheek and pretends to be in unbearable pain, quickly making up an excuse about needing urgent medical treatment before promising to catch up later. Safely away from the chaos, he calls Yahyao to confirm whether the target is still staying at the Four Seasons. Yahyao immediately starts sweating. The moment she hears about the supposed theft at Grandma's house, Chow grows furious too, but hesitates after his girlfriend demands the exact room number. The young woman is fully determined to storm into the suite and drag her ex-husband back to answer for the missing $5 million watch. Chow definitely wants to see the rival suffer, but warns her that the hotel owner is extremely influential and suggests calling the police instead to avoid creating a massive scandal. Annoyed by what she sees as cowardice, Yahyao shoves him aside and storms toward the presidential suite alone. Standing in front of the luxurious doors, she starts pounding violently and yelling for her ex to open up immediately. When Yechen answers, he is visibly irritated by the sheer audacity of his ex-wife showing up right after the divorce. For a brief second, the calm and commanding presence in his posture catches Yahyao completely off guard, but she quickly snaps back into attack mode, aggressively demanding answers about her grandmother's missing Richard Mille watch. Completely confused by the absurd accusation, he simply listens as the woman points toward the suite and claims a broke nobody could never afford that kind of luxury without robbing her family first. Yechen understands the situation instantly. The Wang family once again found a way to blame someone else for their own problems. He immediately shuts down the accusation and coldly orders Mrs. Wang to leave. That single formal title hits her harder than expected. During the marriage, she had grown used to being called goddess, darling, or beloved wife. She never imagined the same man who once showered her with affection would now speak to her like she was nothing more than a complete stranger. Unable to accept the rejection, Yahyao quickly started suspecting that his rush to kick her out was because he was hiding another woman inside the suite. Yechen thought the accusation was insane and warned her that if she didn't leave immediately, he would call hotel security. Refusing to back down, the young woman made an arrogant proposal. If he confessed to the theft and accepted the matriarch's punishment, she would spare him. Otherwise, she would call the authorities. Raising her voice, she threatened him with 15 years in prison over the $1 million watch and demanded that he get on his knees if he wanted to save himself. Yechen's response was cold and immediate. He slammed the door shut right in her face. Inside the suite, he reflected on how his old love had made him vulnerable to someone who now only knew how to humiliate him. Outside, Yahyao kept screaming in fury, swearing she would throw him behind bars. Meanwhile, chaos was breaking out at the banquet reception. The birthday matriarch was furious after learning her granddaughter had called the police, insisting that clan matters should always be handled in secret, far away from public eyes. Sulan immediately rushed to defend her daughter, arguing that the young man's stubbornness had forced them into drastic measures. Since he was no longer part of the family, the clan's rules no longer applied to him. In her eyes, the ex-son-in-law deserved nothing less than rotting in misery. The reason for such harshness seemed simple. The young man had stained the family's reputation. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers had already arrived and were taking Yahyao's statement. Without hesitation, she poured poison into every word, calling her ex a parasite and bringing up their recent divorce. She insisted he had stolen the $1 million Richard Mille watch, sold it, and used the money to show off in the presidential suite with other women, demanding the con artist be arrested immediately. Down in the lobby, the police ordered hotel management to call Yechen. Upstairs, the young man was relaxing peacefully on the couch when his phone started ringing. Seeing that he ignored the call, Yahyao mocked him, claiming he had locked himself inside out of fear of the authorities. With her approval, the officers took the elevator upstairs to handle things directly at the suite. Yechen answered the door wearing nothing but a bathrobe. The officer leading the investigation, a man named Officer Lee, introduced himself and got straight to the point, bringing up the report about the stolen Richard Mille. Yechen denied the accusation immediately. Lee then explained the logic behind the suspicion. How could someone who, until yesterday, had been a broke delivery driver and had supposedly walked away from a divorce with nothing, suddenly afford an 80,000 yuan per night luxury hotel? From law enforcement's perspective, the numbers only made sense if a crime had been committed. Instead of arguing, Yechen simply asked for a minute and walked toward the counter. He returned with several documents and handed them over to Officer Lee. As Lee examined the paperwork, his eyes widened in shock. It was the official stock transfer agreement for the massive Huash Corporation, listing Yechen as the company's largest shareholder and CEO. Alongside the document sat a black corporate card decorated with gold details and polished diamonds. The card looked so extravagant that one of Lee's subordinates immediately suspected it might be fake, prompting the officer to pull up the corporate database to verify the man's identity and financial records. Yechen explained that the creator of the corporate database was Chang Chao, an old college friend of his brother. Since he had not publicly taken over as CEO yet to avoid unnecessary attention, his information remained under strict confidentiality. Still, he was willing to make an exception for law enforcement. Right there, he called his friend and asked him to unlock access to his profile for the next 10 minutes. As soon as permission was granted, the officers typed in Hwash Corporation's name. The page loaded, and the shock hit instantly. A photo of Yechin appeared on screen, dressed in a tailored suit and officially identified as the executive director of the corporate giant. Stunned, the officers even briefly wondered if the company's security system had somehow been hacked. To erase any remaining doubt and prove he had no reason to expose himself, Yechin pulled up his banking app and handed the phone over. The record showed a recent payment of 560,000 yuan, and just below it, an unbelievable balance of 10 billion yuan. The officers were left speechless. Yechin calmly reminded them that when he married Yahello, they had signed a complete separation of assets agreement, meaning his ex-wife had never known about his real fortune. Looking straight at Officer Lee, the new tycoon asked one simple question. Would a man with billions in his account really bother stealing a 5 million yuan watch? Completely stunned by the young man's power, Chief Lee came to one conclusion. He was standing in front of the heir to an incredibly secretive and powerful dynasty. What he couldn't understand was how someone like that had willingly accepted being treated like a nobody by the Wang family. Yechin requested complete discretion, explaining that everything had been part of a trial imposed through his clan's inheritance, something he had been obligated to endure. Familiar with how high society worked, Officer Lee understood immediately that the billionaire wanted to keep his true identity hidden from the Wangs. He reassured Yechin, promising absolute secrecy regarding his wealth. As they stepped back into the hallway, the officers formally apologized for the inconvenience, while the young man politely escorted them to the door. The real twist happened downstairs in the lobby. After coming back down, the officers approached Yahello and advised her to go home and search again, because the watch was clearly somewhere else, and her ex-husband was completely innocent. Chow and his girlfriend were left speechless, furious. The young woman exploded at the officers, demanding to know how a broke delivery driver could afford such luxury if he hadn't stolen something. Hearing her mockery, the officers nearly laughed, remembering the 10 billion yuan sitting in his bank account. Lee was firm. Without physical evidence or footage of the crime, there would be no arrest. He even gave her a sharp piece of advice, telling her to stop calling her ex garbage or a bum because she was only embarrassing herself. Still blinded by arrogance, Yahello insisted she would never have left him if he had actually been successful. The comment shocked Officer Lee, who could barely believe this woman had the audacity to dump a financial titan without ever realizing who he really was. Feeling the weight of her mistake but still blinded by pride, the young woman tried one last move and asked if there had been another woman hidden inside the presidential suite. With an ironic smile, Chief Lee assured her that Yechin had been completely alone. The answer visibly deflated Yahello, leaving her trapped between wounded pride and the romantic illusion that her ex was still locked away suffering over her. Chow watched the police car drive away, unable to understand why the officers had treated his rival with so much respect. Just then, Yahello's phone rang. It was her brother Zoe, asking whether her ex had already been taken away in handcuffs. Frustrated, she vented about how the officers kept demanding actual evidence. On the other end of the line, her brother was already trying to figure out how they could find a receipt or some kind of trail proving the watch had been sold. The truth was, her brother already knew there was no way to find any proof, since the real Richard Mill was hidden inside the blue box sitting right in his hands. To keep the lie alive, the schemer switched tactics and promised his sister he would fake a witness to claim Yechin had sold the watch. He assured her he would handle everything, and that the lowlife would rot in prison no matter what. After hanging up, Yahello stared at the screen, lost in thought. She trusted her brother's plan, but a small sense of doubt about how this whole setup would end started creeping into her mind. The emotional whirlwind brought back memories of the marriage, reminding her of how Yechin used to change his entire style just to earn one compliment from her. Lost in the past, she barely noticed Chow walking up beside her. The rich heir wrapped an arm around her waist, and with clear ulterior motives, suggested they head upstairs and spend some time in one of the hotel rooms. Her reaction was brutal. A sharp slap cracked across Chow's face. Yahello humiliated him on the spot, calling him a coward who couldn't even stand up to her ex and only cared about satisfying his own desires. With his cheek burning, Chow swallowed his pride and silently swore to destroy Yechin, blaming him for ruining what should have been a perfect night. To make things worse, Manager Xiao showed up trying to flatter his boss, praising Yayao's strong personality. Xiao took his anger out on the employee, grabbing him by the collar and ordering him to keep a close eye on Yechin, demanding updates the second the guy stepped out of the suite. The night passed, and by 6 in the morning the hotel lobby came to a complete stop. When the staff saw Yechin walking downstairs with flawless posture and natural authority, they were stunned. To the reception staff, there was no doubt anymore. This man carried himself like a true emperor. The transformation was impossible to ignore. Yechin gave off the aura of a real leader, nothing like the ordinary man from the day before. As soon as he walked out, Manager Xiao acted fast and called Chao, reporting that the target had finally left the hotel. Xiao got into his car and followed Yechin through the city, updating the rich heir on his route toward downtown. 20 minutes later, Yechin's taxi stopped right in front of the massive headquarters of Huash Corporation. As he stepped out, the young man thought back with amusement to Vice President Qin Hongyan, who had tried to shut every door in the city on him the day before, imagining the look on her face once she learned the truth. Meanwhile, Chao lounged in bed while listening to the manager's report about Yechin heading to the company. Confused about the reason for the visit, he remembered Qin's threats against the guy and instantly saw an opportunity to ruin the ex-delivery driver for good while getting closer to the executive at the same time. Without wasting a second, Chao called Qin Hongyan. The businesswoman answered, surprised to hear from him so early in the morning, and he quickly reminded her about the toast they shared at the banquet. Getting straight to the point, Chao warned her that the Wang family's former son-in-law, driven by resentment over the citywide boycott against him, had just broken into her company building looking for revenge. At first, Qin brushed it off, confidently saying the building's security system and electronic gates would stop any intruder before they even got past the lobby. That was when Chao dropped the bombshell. The guy had already used an access card at the gate and taken the elevator straight to the top floor. Shocked, the executive couldn't understand how Yechin had gotten corporate credentials. To explain it away, the rich heir made up a story, claiming the scammer had used the $5 million from the stolen watch to bribe employees and buy access. Pretending to be deeply concerned, Chao showered the businesswoman with compliments about her beauty before poisoning the conversation, saying it would be a tragedy if some criminal carrying a knife did something to her. Alarmed by the warning, Qin jumped up from the couch, thanked him for the heads up, and promised to send in heavy security immediately to intercept the intruder. Chao even tried offering to come protect her himself, but the call ended before he could finish, leaving him hanging. On the other end, Qin immediately called her assistant Rongrong, ordering a full sweep of the executive floor to search for any intruder, with strict instructions to call the police if they found one. A few minutes later, Secretary Rongrong crossed the lobby. With her long, dark hair and natural elegance, the young woman easily caught the guard's attention, though she carried herself with a much softer and simpler presence compared to Qin's intimidating aura. Following her boss's orders, she unlocked the main office and came face to face with Yechin. Startled, the secretary immediately questioned how he had bypassed security and broken into the president's office. Yechin, who had been calmly reviewing company documents, looked up and asked her to identify herself. After learning she was Qin Hongyan's personal assistant, he found the executive's hiring preferences oddly interesting, quietly making sarcastic assumptions about her work style and tastes. Completely unfazed by the interrogation, he introduced himself directly and dropped the bombshell. Starting at that very moment, he was the new chairman and owner of Huash Corporation. Caught off guard by the authority in his voice, Rongrong instantly changed her tone. She apologized for the misunderstanding and explained that she had only barged in because of orders to hunt down a supposedly dangerous intruder inside the building. Yechin immediately realized it was just another result of the Wang family's gossip and harassment. Tired of the mind games from his ex-wife's clan, the new CEO dismissed the issue and simply told the secretary to return to her duties. On her way to the company, Vice President Qin Hongyan couldn't stop thinking about how unbelievable this sudden leadership change at Huash Corporation was. The mystery started when her secretary, Rongrong, called directly from the women's restroom to give an update. The supposed intruder was actually the company's new chairman, and he demanded Qin's immediate presence the second she arrived at the building. Stunned by the news, the executive hung up and slammed her foot on the gas in her red sports car, speeding through the city streets toward headquarters. 10 minutes later, Qin stepped into the business center and was greeted by Rongrong. The assistant confirmed that the new boss was already settled into the main office waiting for the meeting. In the hallway, the atmosphere felt unusually lively, with several female employees already moving around far earlier than normal. The reason for all the excitement had already spread through the company group chats. Rumors were flying that the newly arrived CEO was unbelievably handsome. Intrigued, Chin asked her secretary what the guy looked like. Rong awkwardly admitted that he looked like a movie star and seemed to be only around 23 years old. The revelation rubbed the executive the wrong way. Chin had reached the vice presidency at 32 and knew firsthand how ruthless the business world could be. Seeing someone so young sitting at the top felt completely absurd. Trying to regain control of the situation, Chin ordered her assistant to call a general meeting with the entire staff. She criticized the employees' behavior, saying all the excitement over the new executive was embarrassing for the department. Sensing her boss's irritation, Rong quickly backed off, flattering the executive and saying no one in the company carried as much authority and presence as Chin Hongyan herself. Rong even made a guess, suggesting the new chairman might have shown up early just to impress Chin, but the executive shut the chatter down immediately. In the business world, she was used to being in control and bending any man who crossed her path to her will. To the women at reception, the young CEO seemed untouchable, but Chin was convinced she would have him wrapped around her finger soon enough. The assistant instantly agreed, reminding her how the boss had already managed to dominate difficult billionaires in a matter of minutes with her ruthless presence alone. Deep down, the whole staff admired that talent for manipulation. Determined to put on a show of authority, Chin marched toward the president's office and deliberately left the door wide open, allowing the employees to watch from the sidelines as the newcomer got put in his place. The crowd gathering in the hallway buzzed with excitement, fully expecting to see the new boss submit to the powerful vice president, cementing her absolute control over the company. The moment she stepped into the office, Chin sized up the man sitting with his back turned. From the sharp jawline and side profile alone, he genuinely looked like some Korean drama star. Feeling something strangely familiar about his posture, she announced her presence with authority, but the executive didn't even move, staying focused on the paperwork spread across the desk. Outside, the employees waited for the exact moment the chairman would turn around, lose his breath at Chin's beauty, and surrender to the queen of the corporation. But the twist hit like a truck. The moment the man finally turned and revealed his face, Chin's expression froze as she recognized Yeshin, the so-called broke former son-in-law she had humiliated at the Wang family banquet. The shock hit her so hard her legs gave out, and the proud vice president collapsed to her knees right in front of the new owner of the empire. The scene stunned everyone watching from the hallway. Rong and the other employees stared through the glass in complete disbelief, unable to understand what they were seeing. The original plan had been to watch the new executive fold under pressure, but reality flipped upside down. It was the powerful vice president kneeling on the floor instead. The moment Yechin noticed the crowd of gossiping employees peeking inside, he shot them such a cold stare that the women immediately backed away and scattered, terrified of getting fired. On the office floor, Chin Hongyan looked completely drained, unable to even defend herself. The new CEO looked down at her, fully aware that this humiliation was the price for all the insults she had thrown at him the day before. Overwhelmed with embarrassment and internally cursing the Wang family drama that had dragged her into such a mistake, the executive swallowed her pride and formally apologized, acknowledging the young man's authority. Yechin casually brought up the rumors from the previous night, including the gossip about her and Chao supposedly being lovers, as well as the ridiculous story about him renting a private island to propose to her. Nervous and visibly blushing, Chin doubled down on her apologies. Satisfied with her sincerity, Yechin told her to get up and ordered her to close the office blinds to end the spectacle and stop more rumors from spreading through the building. Sitting comfortably in the chairman's seat, he adopted a sarcastic tone and repeated the threat she had made at the banquet about cutting off his oxygen in the job market. With a faint smirk, he asked what methods she planned to use now that the tables had turned. Chin didn't even try to justify herself. Completely submitting to the authority of her new boss, she said she would accept any punishment for her mistake. If he wanted to yell at her or even fire her from the corporation, she would accept it, pack her things, and leave without complaint. Despite the massive hit to her reputation, the executive took a deep breath, trying to stay composed and not let panic consume her in front of the new owner of the empire. Yechin noticed that, despite everything, the executive had taken responsibility without trying to twist what happened at the banquet. To calm her down, the new CEO assured her he had no intention of firing her. After all, the night before, she had been the only person willing to give him an opportunity. If he had really been the helpless nobody everyone believed he was, she would have been his only lifeline. Relieved, the young woman looked at him with gratitude and swore absolute loyalty from that point on. Yechin accepted the apology but made one thing clear. His forgiveness did not extend to the rest of the group who had tried to publicly destroy him. Now treating her boss with more familiarity and asking to simply be called Hongyan, she received her first assignment: dig up complete background files on everyone who had targeted him the day before. The executive accepted the order, knowing the new chairman's retaliation would shake the city's business world to its core. Half an hour later, a folder full of detailed reports was already sitting on the CEO's desk, including Chao's full profile. As they reviewed the targets, Hongyan remembered how Yahello always bragged about Chao's supposedly untouchable fortune. On paper, his family presented itself as a first-class powerhouse, but the vice president revealed the reality. The Fan family was already declining, holding roughly $3 billion in assets, only slightly more than the Wang family. They also discussed the $70 million engineering project tied to the Hang family business. Hongyan suggested cutting the investment and returning the bribes to choke them financially, pointing out how devastated Yahello would be when reality hit. Yechen, however, preferred to separate personal revenge from business. Instead of making a rushed decision, he ordered a full review of the project's technical plan before any cuts were made. Just as Hongyan was about to hand over the paperwork, the chairman stopped her, saying he intended to evaluate the case personally. Meanwhile, down in the building lobby, Chao arrived full of confidence, expecting to see Yechen thrown out by security on Chin's orders. Out of nowhere, a female employee let out a surprised gasp when she spotted him. The rich heir frowned, not recognizing her at all. Irritated by the cold reaction, she reminded him about the night they met at a bar, when he ended up leaving with a woman whose looks were highly questionable. Trying to cover the embarrassment, Chao pretended to remember and casually asked what she did there. Realizing the employee had unrestricted access to the building, the schemer turned on the charm and asked her to guide him upstairs, claiming he had urgent business to handle. Chao headed up with one goal in mind: win over the executive and make sure his rival was finished for good. As he neared the main office, he passed 3 employees whispering in shock about an influential woman who had apparently been seen kneeling near the entrance earlier. Ignoring both the gossip and the receptionist's warnings, the rich heir marched toward the executive floor and shoved the office door open, determined to find the vice president. The moment he barged inside, Chao found Yechen sitting calmly behind the main desk. Smirking with mockery, the intruder immediately started throwing insults, calling him a broke thief and abandoned ex-husband, claiming the guy had crawled in there looking for some pathetic revenge against management. Walking past the executive, Chao casually addressed her as Sister Hongyan, puffing up his chest and proudly promising that he would personally throw the trash out to protect her. The answer to his audacity came instantly. A loud slap cracked across Chao's face, delivered by Chin Hongyan herself. Furious at seeing her superior insulted right in front of her, she snapped that she wasn't anyone's sister and demanded to be addressed strictly by her title as vice president. Dazed and clutching his cheek, Chao stammered out an excuse, completely unable to understand why he'd just been slapped while trying to defend her from that bum, blinded by his own arrogance. He assumed the suited-up rival had shown up begging on his knees for a security job after getting every door slammed in his face at the previous night's banquet. In Chao's narrow mind, Yechen had come there to humiliate himself just to become the company's watchdog, fully convinced the vice president would honor her promise to crush him in the business world. From the corner of the room, Secretary Rongrong watched the rich heir's delusion in complete disbelief, already seeing the massive downfall coming for someone reckless enough to insult the owner of the entire empire to his face. Another slap landed hard across Chao's face, completely burying any chance of further mockery. Chin Hongyan turned to the secretary and ordered the intruder thrown out immediately, also demanding the firing of the lobby employee who had helped him gain access. The company's security guards moved in and restrained the rich heir. Chao fumed with rage as he realized that despite being the son of an influential family, he had just been humiliated twice in front of his biggest rival. Dragged through the hallways, he screamed toward Yechen, swearing he'd ruin him and make him starve in poverty until he ended up homeless. Even out on the sidewalk, the man kept spewing venom, promising to use all his power and influence to crush his rival and make the couple crawl at his feet, his face still burning red from the slaps. Chao climbed into his car and drove off. As he sped through the city, his mind twisted reality into a false narrative where Yechen had become nothing more than the executive's servant and personal bodyguard. He needed to spread that story and use it to destroy the former delivery guy in the eyes of his ex-family. An hour later, at the Hang family mansion, the schemer gathered the clan to share the news. He confidently told the matriarch that Yayao's ex-husband was now working as a private bodyguard, carrying reports and opening doors for the vice president. The revelation sparked waves of mockery and disbelief among the relatives, while Yayao listened in complete silence. To make the story even more dramatic, Chow claimed witnesses inside the company had seen Yechen collapse to his knees the moment Qin Hongyan entered the office, desperately begging for an opportunity. According to the rich heir's twisted version of events, the businesswoman only spared him out of pity for how pathetic he looked. The story sparked a wave of outrage in Yayao. She boiled with anger at the thought that her ex-husband, the man who rejected every chance at reconciliation and chose divorce over bowing to her, was now humiliating himself on his knees for another woman. In the middle of the family chaos, Aunt Yuan mocked the situation, ridiculing her niece for failing to control her own man and bragging that if she had been in her shoes, she would have turned him into a servant from day one of the marriage. Her aunt's venom left Yayao bitterly regretting how understanding she had been in the past. If she could go back, she would have made her ex crawl all day long. Consumed by resentment, Yayao accused the vice president of betrayal and suggested the Hang family cut ties with and sabotage the executive. The matriarch's response came instantly. A hard slap cracked across her granddaughter's face. Elder Hang quickly reminded the young woman about the 70 million investment the rival controlled, making any hostility toward her financial suicide. Cousin Soy backed up the scolding, pointing out how ridiculous Yayao's jealousy was considering the massive gap in both power and beauty separating her from Qin Hongyan. Even after being forbidden from causing trouble at the Huash Corporation, Yayao's persistence forced the matriarch to take control of the situation herself. The elderly woman ordered her son to call the vice president on speakerphone immediately. Without wasting time, she demanded answers, bringing up the rumor that Yechen had become the executive's personal bodyguard. She reminded Qin about their agreement from the previous night to suffocate the young man's future in the market and prioritize the Hang family's projects, demanding to know why she had broken the deal. On the other end of the line, the businesswoman dodged the questions as best she could, apologizing for the sudden change of plans. Beneath her calm tone was barely hidden panic. After all, if the elderly woman ever found out that the true owner of the empire was the very man they had publicly humiliated, the entire city would turn upside down. To avoid disaster, the executive simply reassured them that the Hang family's interests were still receiving her full attention, hoping to end the conversation before the billionaire secret came crashing into the open. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the matriarch wrapped up the call, dismissing Yechen as nothing more than useless leftovers who now belonged to the executive, ignoring Yayao's protests echoing through the room. Holding no personal grudge against the young man, the old woman made it clear that her only concern was securing the 70 million investment. Qin Hongyan revealed that she had already presented the proposal to President Ye, and the empire's top boss had approved the core idea, though he still wanted to review the technical reports. The update left the old matriarch caught between surprise and relief. The vice president promised to have Sikiao visit headquarters to finalize the remaining details directly with upper management. The moment the call ended, old Madam Hang ordered her son to be as flattering and respectful as possible toward the corporation's new president. Sensing an opportunity, the uncle suggested dropping the stolen watch complaint to avoid unnecessary tension, but the matriarch refused to budge. The hunt for the Richard Mill would continue, and the thief would pay no matter what. That was when the scheming grandson added more fuel to the fire, falsely claiming that Yechen had already passed the watch to a local fence. The old woman immediately ordered them to gather proof of the crime, convinced that the vice president would never lift a finger to protect some lowly bodyguard. She then showered praise on her grandson for landing the contract before redirecting her fury at Yayao and her parents. Publicly humiliating her granddaughter, the matriarch called her incompetent for failing to keep even a submissive husband under control and claimed Aunt Yuan would have handled things far better. Humiliated and crushed, Yayao burst into tears and ran off while her mother shouted after her. Consumed by resentment and blaming Yechen for every humiliation she had suffered in front of the family, she swore she would destroy him. Not long after, the young woman pulled into the underground parking garage of the Huash Corporation. Hidden between parked luxury cars, her eyes locked onto the exit ramp just as Yechen and Vice President Qin Hongyan walked side by side toward an expensive vehicle. Seeing the man who once chased after her now walking with confidence beside another woman made her blood boil instantly. Yechen's transformation after the divorce was impossible to ignore. The man now carried himself flawlessly. The second she stepped out of her car, Yayao stormed forward. throwing insults and shouting that he had become the vice president's obedient little lapdog. Yechin turned toward his ex-wife while Hongyan watched in confusion, baffled by the sheer arrogance and nerve of the outburst. Yahyao exploded, demanding to know how he could humiliate himself and beg another woman for a job while refusing to do the same for his own wife. Bringing up the past, she insisted that if he had only crawled back to her, he could have continued enjoying the status of being the Wang family's son-in-law. Yechin merely smirked at her arrogance. He reminded her that while they were still married, she had locked herself away in a hotel room with Chow, cheating on him, and now somehow believed she still had the right to demand loyalty. Blinded by pride, Yahyao snapped back, saying that if he had simply bowed his head at the matriarch's banquet, they would still be together, and she could have convinced her grandmother to forgive him. She even brought up the luxury hotel incident, insisting she never would have called the authorities if he had just knelt down and apologized right there. To her, kneeling before his wife was his duty, while working under the executive was the real embarrassment. Yechin's answer was cold and absolute. He said he would never have had a problem kneeling for a wife, but never for a woman with questionable morals. He pointed out that his tolerance over the past 3 years had only spoiled her. Yahyao completely lost it, screaming that her biggest mistake had been being too kind, and if she had known better, she would have forced him to live on his knees from day one. Her arrogant rant was cut off brutally. A loud slap cracked across Yahyao's left cheek. The blow came straight from Qin Hongyan, who had run out of patience for the scene. Right there in the parking garage, the vice president humiliated her, exposing the affair and declaring that a woman with no morals had no right to lecture anyone about dignity. Holding her burning face through tears, Yahyao staggered back in fear, shaken by the executive's overwhelming presence, as if another slap could come at any second. Hongyan looked ready to keep going without hesitation. Catching her breath, the young hangwoman glared at the vice president with pure bitterness, feeling as if the executive had stolen her former partner and now dared to physically humiliate her too. Yechin stepped in, touching Hongyan's shoulder and telling her to let it go, putting an end to the argument. The company's new leader turned to his ex-wife and firmly ordered her to leave, reminding her that whatever bond they once had was long gone. But Yahyao refused to lose control over the man she once treated like a pet. She demanded that he quit Huash Corporation and leave Qin behind, promising to outpay any offer. If the vice president was paying him $200,000 a year for security work, she would offer $500,000 from her own pocket. The ridiculous bribe made Yechin cough out a laugh, while Hongyan burst into laughter at the girl's desperation. The vice president mocked her rival's naivete, saying that even if she added another zero to the offer, it still wouldn't be nearly enough to buy someone like him. As the executive turned to leave, Yahyao started spiraling through the math, unable to believe any bodyguard could possibly cost that much. If his salary really was $5 million, then the boss had to be insane. Desperate, she rushed forward and grabbed Yechin's hand, begging him to come back home that very day. Then she switched tactics, revealing that her brother had supposedly gathered records, proving he sold the stolen watch, and that the authorities would arrest him any moment. She promised that if he abandoned the businesswoman to become her personal bodyguard, she would beg Chow to drop the complaint. Yechin thanked her for the kindness, but turned down the offer to become anyone's servant. He made it clear he had no interest in guarding the door while his ex-wife entertained other men in motel rooms. Sliding behind the wheel of the luxury car, he left her with one final warning. If her brother really had evidence, then they should go ahead and file the lawsuit. The vehicle sped off, while Yahyao chased after it for a few steps, shouting for them to stop, only to be completely ignored. Left standing alone in the garage, her mind twisted reality to cope with what had happened. She convinced herself no one would ever pay millions for a bodyguard, deciding instead that Yechin must be receiving extra money to act as the vice president's secret lover. Disgust and outrage consumed her, as she became convinced her ex-husband had turned into nothing more than a luxury gigolo being kept by a wealthy businesswoman. The 7th Street was the city's true underworld, a lawless territory ruled by a tattooed criminal nicknamed Watermelon. It was inside this hostile district that Zoe showed up to strike a dirty deal. With the $5 million Richard Mille in hand, the spoiled heir offered the watch for $4.5 million, demanding only one thing in return. The gangster had to confirm that he had bought the piece directly from Yechin. Taking one look at the bruised face of his visitor, the thug immediately guessed that the former son-in-law had beaten him up. Zoe confirmed it without hesitation, revealing his plan to quietly throw his enemy behind bars. But the massive payout was rejected. The local boss pointed to a strict order from his mentor, the untouchable crime lord Master Lu. Zero involvement in messy drama involving wealthy families. The spoiled heir kept pushing, arguing that the target had already been thrown out of his own clan, but he was shut down hard. To the gangster, his master's word was law, and he told the rich brat to find someone else for the job. Desperate to frame Yechin and destroy him, Zoe dropped the price to 4 million. The criminal simply stood up from the couch with a sarcastic grin, staying loyal to his principles. Blinded by hatred, the man in the suit played his final card and lowered the offer all the way to 3 million. The bait of 2 million in pure profit finally broke the gangster's resistance. Zoe pressed the weak spot, arguing that even the mighty Master Liu would never turn down easy money. Torn between blind loyalty and greed, the thug gave in. In the end, money won, and the dirty deal was sealed. While the setup unfolded in the criminal underworld, Yechin was laying down the rules from inside the car. In a sharp tone, he gave the vice president a clear order. She was strictly forbidden from laying hands on his ex-wife again without his permission. Hongyan found the reaction strange, assuming it came from pity, and made sure to remind him just how awful Yahyao really was. The new CEO, however, responded with cold logic. To him, hate was simply love turned upside down. The depth and icy calm behind that perspective left the executive fascinated. Realizing the kind of man sitting beside her, she came to one conclusion. If his ex-wife had been foolish enough to throw him away, then she would gladly keep him for herself. Their drive ended near the land surrounding Yingwei Temple. The place was breathtaking, surrounded by hot springs and forests of crimson maple trees. The perfect setting for the luxury housing project the Hang family planned to build to attract the city's millionaires. Walking across the property, the executive couldn't hide her confusion and asked her boss the obvious question: why invest money into the same family that had humiliated and thrown him away? Yechin's answer revealed the real story. The project had actually been his idea all along. The Hang family had shamelessly stolen it. He explained that after the clan patriarch passed away, the heirs proved to be completely useless, obsessed only with fighting over scraps of inheritance. Wanting to help his ex-wife enter high society without giving real power to her incompetent relatives, he had designed the entire luxury complex himself and handed the project directly to Yahyao. The plan eventually ended up in the matriarch's hands, who passed execution to her son, Siqiang. Hongyan pointed out that the clan always prioritized the men because of the family's deep sexism, constantly pushing Yahyao away from major business decisions. The executive admitted she felt a bit sorry for the heiress because of the exclusion, but Yechin quickly brought reality back into the conversation, reminding her that the same family had forced Yahyao into marrying him. Hongyan didn't hesitate to respond, saying that no amount of family pressure could ever justify betrayal. Smiling softly, she picked up a maple leaf, gently placed it on her boss's head, and pulled him in for a toast. Meanwhile, far away from there, the scene shifted to the noisy streets lined with bars. In broad daylight, Yahyao was trying to drown her frustrations in cocktails while hanging out with her party-loving friend, Song Hong. Confused by the early drinking, her friend asked who had caused all this anger. Boiling with rage and holding back tears, the young Hang heiress vented about the slap she received from Qin Hongyan, claiming she had only scolded her useless ex-husband and that the businesswoman had completely overreacted for no reason. Song Hong looked at the situation coldly and explained the logic of the corporate underworld. By attacking the bodyguard, Yahyao had insulted the boss. In her eyes, the Huash vice president had simply defended her territory since Yechin now belonged to her. Trying to ease her own guilt, Yahyao argued that the hotel incident had been a one-time mistake and that powerful women acted like that all the time nowadays. Her friend nearly choked on her drink and sarcastically reminded her that this had already been the third time she cheated. Yahyao simply shrugged, pointing out that her ex had been too clueless to suspect anything, continuing to play the role of the obedient, betrayed husband. The heiress kept ranting, unable to accept the fact that the man had rejected her offer of 500,000 just to become someone else's servant for less money. Song Hong quickly diagnosed the situation. Yechin had spent 3 years getting stepped on while obsessively devoted to his wife, and now this sudden turnaround was nothing more than wounded pride. In her opinion, he had grown tired of living like a dependent nobody and became the rival's bodyguard to earn his own money, restore his dignity, and eventually make his ex-wife regret throwing him away. The analysis sparked something inside Yahyao. Her ego instantly latched onto the idea that Yechin's rebellion was all an act and that her ex-husband was still hopelessly in love with her, putting on this entire performance to win her back someday. When questioned about marrying Chao, she admitted she had doubts. The rich heir was unstable and would never show the same devotion as her former delivery driver husband. Song Hong suggested using Chow for now and taking Yechen back later. The heiress liked the idea, thinking it was only fair to make him crawl a little longer before forgiving him, especially since he had spent 3 years as the family's personal servant and only became obsessed with money after getting sick during a family trip to Switzerland. Their little fantasy was interrupted by a phone call. The matriarch demanded that Yahyao return to the mansion immediately. Her cousin Zoe had finally cornered the rival with evidence tied to the missing luxury watch. The next morning, the atmosphere at Huash Corporation was filled with absolute respect, as employees bowed toward the new CEO. Yechen had just crossed the lobby when his phone buzzed with a call from Zoe. On the other end, the spoiled heir used a mocking tone to summon him to the Hang residence, claiming the witness who bought the stolen watch was already there waiting. Yechen tried brushing off the provocation, saying he had more important things to do, but Zoe mocked him and called him a coward. Realizing the clan had set up an entire circus with a fake witness, the president decided to go there and shut down the nonsense once and for all. After hanging up, Yechen called in Secretary Rongrong to act as his driver. The young woman immediately took control of the black executive sedan, speeding towards Sishan Villa. Watching the trees blur past outside the window, he couldn't help but feel the irony of the situation. He was returning to the den of his former tormentors, not as the humiliated son-in-law, but as the most powerful man in the region. Half an hour later, the luxury vehicle rolled through the gates of the countryside estate and stopped in front of the family's welcoming committee. As soon as the black car came to a stop, Rongrong stepped out of the driver's seat and, with flawless professionalism, opened the rear door for her boss. The sight stunned the matriarch and the relatives watching from the balcony. They recognized the young woman as Vice President Huash's elite assistant and couldn't understand why she would willingly play chauffeur for a mere bodyguard. Yechen stepped out of the car and calmly instructed her to wait outside until the meeting was over, receiving an obedient nod in return. His ex-wife watched everything with a smug smile, fully convinced her friend's theory had been right all along. In her mind, Yechen was blowing money he didn't have, renting luxury cars and staging fake displays of wealth just to feed his ego and impress her. Breaking the silence, Zoe stepped forward with mockery dripping from his voice, laughing at the ridiculous act and calling him a fraud pretending to be rich. Old Lady Hang and her daughter piled on, criticizing his suit and the presence of a private driver. Faced with the insults, Yechen kept his composure, silently concluding that this family's arrogance was hopeless. Fed up with wasting time, the CEO demanded to see the so-called witness to the crime immediately. Zoe accepted the challenge and led him through the back of the property to an isolated pavilion. The moment the door swung open, the scam was exposed. Waiting inside was the gangster nicknamed Watermelon, surrounded by goons armed with baseball bats. The tattooed criminal stepped forward and, pretending to follow the script, directly accused Yechen of approaching him days earlier to sell the valuable Richard Mille watch for $5 million. Zoe mocked his rival, claiming the entire underworld knew Watermelon's reputation and that there was no point pretending to be clueless in the face of such solid evidence. Yechen simply looked at the spoiled rich kid with an amused smile, realizing just how desperate the family had become in trying to bring him down. The rich brat doubled down, pointing his finger and accusing him of grand theft. The matriarch stepped forward, acting outraged by the audacity of her former son-in-law standing tall and denying the crime in front of a living witness. Yechen stayed calm, looking the old woman straight in the eye as he explained that he had only come there to put an end to this farce because he had never laid a finger on her jewelry. With a sneer, the elderly woman opened the Richard Mille case, pointing out that it was a rare limited edition model with a unique serial number and demanded to know how it ended up in the gangster's hands if he wasn't the thief. Following Soy's script, Watermelon claimed Yechen had used the money from the sale to flex in the presidential suite at the Four Seasons, insisting he was absolutely certain about the deal. Yechen immediately fired back, making it clear that the hotel stay had been paid for with his own money. Realizing the thug wasn't about to back off from the lie after being bribed, he grew tired of trying to reason like an ordinary man and decided to drop the bombshell. He revealed his true identity as the billionaire owner and president of Huash Corporation. The silence in the room lasted only a second before the family erupted into loud laughter. Only the old matriarch remained tense and suspicious. Chow and the uncles were practically crying from laughing, mocking his delusions of grandeur and comparing the whole thing to a cheap comedy. Yahyao and Aunt Yuen Yuen joined in too, with the cousin joking that she'd gladly remarry him on the spot just to become the wife of a fake billionaire. Cutting through the laughter, the gangster barked at Yechen to shut up and ordered him to get on his knees immediately and beg the matriarch for forgiveness. Yahyao resorted to emotional manipulation, bringing up their 3 years together and assuring him the family wouldn't send him to jail as long as he bowed his head and apologized for the embarrassment. She even promised to repay the supposed financial losses herself in the future. Yechen's answer was firm. He had committed no crime, and nobody in that family had the dignity or the right to see him kneel. Offended by his defiance, Yahyao's mother demanded the police be called immediately, swearing she would make the parasite rot in prison for 10 years to restore the family's honor. The fake story Zoe had built was dangerously close to collapsing, an outcome neither he nor Watermelon could afford. Their whole plan revolved around breaking the young executive's spirit in front of the matriarch and burying the situation for good. Running out of patience, the gangster ordered his men to handle things the hard way. One of the thugs rushed forward and grabbed Yechen by the arm, shouting for him to get on his knees. The president of Huash kept his eyes locked ahead and coldly declared that nobody in the room had enough dignity to see him on the ground. The pace shifted instantly. With an explosive movement, Yechen threw a devastating punch that knocked the first attacker out cold. The force of the impact sent the thug crashing into the man beside him, throwing him off balance and knocking him down too. Realizing Yechen wasn't easy prey, Zoe panicked and ordered all the thugs to attack at once. Suddenly, the late grandmother's little white dog burst into the room. The same dog Yechen had cared for throughout all 3 years of his marriage planted itself in front of him, barking furiously at the criminals. Holding the dog in his arms, Yechen couldn't help but notice the irony. The animal showed far more loyalty and humanity than anyone in that toxic family. At the matriarch's command, Aunt Yuan stormed over and yanked the dog away. She gave Yechen one last warning, insisting he swallow his pride and beg for forgiveness before the thugs beat him senseless. Surrounded on all sides, he calmly repeated that no one there deserved his submission. The gang charged with baseball bats, fully intending to break him. What they didn't know was that early in the marriage, the family themselves had sent him overseas on combat missions in active war zones. For a man who had survived a full year on real battlefields soaked in blood and fire, these hired criminals were nothing but amateurs. His counterattack was ruthless. Yechen moved with military precision, turning every opponent into an easy target and taking complete control of the situation. Most of the thugs were already sprawled across the floor, but one last attacker tried a dirty move from behind. The man rushed in and locked Yechen's arms in place, while another thug in a sleeveless jacket pulled out a knife to finish the job. From the corner of the room, Watermelon watched with his arms crossed, convinced Yechen was finally about to pay the price for daring to knock out his men. The thugs looked moments away from winning, but the counterattack came like a storm. With a move straight out of military training, Yechen slammed his head backward, shattering the nose of the man restraining him. Breaking free from the hold, he charged at the knife-wielding thug like a bulldozer, disarming him and snapping his arm in the blink of an eye. The pavilion turned into the scene of a one-sided beatdown. Watching the chaos unfold, Aunt Yuan backed away in panic, unable to understand where that terrifying strength came from. In the middle of the madness, Grandma Hang's thoughts drifted back to the past. At last, she understood why her late husband had stubbornly insisted on Yahyao marrying Yechen in the first place. The old patriarch had seen the young man's deadly potential and wanted an unbeatable protector for his granddaughter. Sikiang let out a nervous laugh and pointed out the bitter irony of the situation to his son. He revealed an old family secret. Years ago, the late patriarch had actually offered Yechen to Yuan first, but after seeing him as nothing more than a poor village kid, they rejected him without a second thought and pushed the marriage onto Yahyao instead. Hearing this, Zoe mocked the family's stupidity, while Yuan practically thanked the heavens for dodging the bullet of marrying some wild man who solved everything with violence, rubbing salt in her cousin's wounds. As Yechen finished off the last few thugs, he silently overheard every word. The revelation left a bitter taste in his mouth. 3 years ago, after returning from brutal combat missions overseas, exhausted from endless bloodshed, death, and horror, all he had wanted was the warmth of a real home and genuine love. In that vulnerable state, he had fallen for Yahyao, never realizing he had only been a disposable pawn in the family's game of interests. The memory of love at first sight, back when he had seen Yahyao as someone sweet and perfect to build a future with, now felt like a cruel joke. Standing there among groaning thugs sprawled across the floor, Yechen finally saw the full extent of that illusion. Step by step, he approached the gang leader. In a split second of panic, the mobster tried to react, only to have his wrist crushed in an iron grip. The blinding pain made Melancia scream helplessly. In an icy tone, the president of Huash demanded the truth. He wanted the names of the people who had paid for the fake story about the stolen watch. Trying to keep up his tough guy act, the gangster spat back that he wasn't afraid to die and dared Yechin to pull the trigger, swearing the Hang family would pay dearly if he crossed the line. Off to the side, Chow started trembling in fear, while the rich girl panicked and shouted for the torture to stop, terrified that her ex-son-in-law might force out a confession that would destroy the family's reputation on the spot. Yechin released the thug with complete disgust and gave the Hang family one final warning. He made it crystal clear that he had never touched the watch and told them to call the police if they truly had any real evidence, demanding they stop pretending they were showing mercy by sparing him. Without another glance back, he turned and headed for the pavilion exit. Halfway there, the small white dog crossed his path again, letting out a sad whimper as if begging to leave with the only person who had ever truly cared for him. Ignoring Zoe's furious shouting, Yechin picked up the dog and declared that it was the only worthwhile thing in that entire estate, and that he was done with that house for good. Watching Yechin leave victorious, the playboy demanded that his father do something, but Sikyang stopped him immediately. Yayao's uncle knew going head-to-head with Yechin physically was suicide and suggested pulling back to come up with a legal strategy instead. When Zoe tried turning to the gangsters for revenge, the move backfired instantly. Melancia, already gathering up his injured men to leave, exploded with rage. Cornering the spoiled rich kid, the mobster demanded $1 million compensation for the disaster of an operation and made it painfully clear that the Hang family had picked a fight with the wrong man. Zoe made one last desperate attempt, demanding the gangster beat Yechin down for good, or better yet, make him disappear entirely. Already seated inside his vehicle, Melancia pretended to agree just to get rid of the annoying rich kid, promising revenge would come sooner or later before driving off. The second the gangster's car cleared the estate gates, the mobster seethed with anger. The public humiliation and nearly broken wrist Yechin had given him would not go unpaid, and he was already planning to collect that debt from the Hang family. Meanwhile, back at the corporate headquarters, the business game kept moving. Yechin approved the investment for the luxury housing project and ordered his vice president to notify the Hang family, demanding they send a committee to headquarters for the official submission of the technical reports. Hongyan gathered the documents and immediately set the process in motion. At the Sishan estate, the news caused an uproar. Uncle Sikyang rushed to tell the matriarch that Huash's board had approved the 70 million investment, but the corporation's new president personally wanted to evaluate the professionalism of his partners. Grandma Hang ordered the engineering team to do their absolute best to impress the billionaire executive. Confident because of past partnerships, Sikyang assured her everything would be flawless. That was when cousin Yuan interrupted, tapping her father on the shoulder and demanding to join the delegation. To Sikyang's surprise, the young woman revealed her real motives. She had learned that the multinational company's new CEO was a young, ridiculously attractive billionaire. Throwing a smug look toward Yahyao, Yuan confidently declared that the billionaire was only dating Vice President Qin Hongyan, and that, being younger and far better looking, she had every chance to charm the tycoon and claim the position of First Lady of the Empire. Zoe immediately backed his sister's plan, and Matriarch Hang loved the idea, arguing that powerful men like that had to be pursued without hesitation. The old woman declared that her granddaughter would accompany her father to the business meeting, leaving Yuan cheering excitedly. Off in the corner, Yahyao watched everything with jealousy and frustration boiling inside her. After all, the luxury housing project had been her idea, yet her grandmother had handed all the credit and the golden opportunity to the family branch that had always been the most ambitious. Yuan mocked the situation mercilessly, declaring that a billionaire would never look twice at used goods, telling her newly divorced cousin not to even bother trying to catch the magnate's attention. Although the matriarch admitted Yahyao was stunningly beautiful, she made the family's new priority crystal clear. Their focus was now on pushing Yuan to the top of the multinational company. She ordered Yahyao to forget the matter and settle for keeping rich boy Chow around instead. Forced to swallow the humiliation in silence, Yahyao simmered with resentment over the old woman's blatant favoritism. An hour later, at the reception area of Huash Corporation, Secretary Rongrong entered the president's office to announce the arrival of Sikyang and his daughter. Without even looking up from the reports he was signing, the young CEO gave a cold and direct order. The visitors were to wait in the lobby indefinitely, and staff were strictly forbidden from offering them so much as a glass of water or coffee. Seated in the waiting area, Yuan adjusted her outfit in annoyance, irritated that her father had forced her to wear an ultra-conservative long dress with nothing more than a modest slit down the leg. Sikyang defended the decision, explaining that if she showed up looking cheap on the very first meeting, the president would lose respect for her. If she wanted to become a billionaire's legitimate wife, her first impression had to scream elegance. The young woman accepted the advice, already bragging that she would soon replace Chin Hongyan and take over everything. Her father smiled proudly, fully aware that if his daughter managed to hook the billionaire, their branch of the family would finally seize complete control of the Hang clan. 10 minutes passed, and still no one came to see them. Frustrated by the endless waiting and total lack of hospitality, Yuan stormed into the secretary's office and demanded service, insisting on 2 cups of black tea. Rong simply gave an unreadable smile and told them to keep waiting. Another half hour dragged by, and the young heiress started throwing a fit in the hallway, yelling about the delayed order. Sikyang told his daughter to calm down, reminding her that once she signed a marriage certificate with the corporation's boss, she'd have the power to fire that useless secretary on the spot. But for now, she needed to keep up appearances. The strategic reminder soothed her ego, bringing the smile back to her face, though moments later she began complaining about back pain from sitting in the same position for so long. Yuan's noble lady act was crumbling just as fast as her patience, and the president still hadn't shown his face. Sikyang, already fuming, snapped that it was unbelievably disrespectful to leave them rotting in the lobby for over an hour. At that exact moment, the double doors opened, and the leader of Huash Corporation finally appeared, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. Yechin knew all too well how spoiled and dramatic Yuan really was at home, but watching her fake modesty in public was almost laughable. Looking her up and down with pure disdain, he loudly commented that her father had clearly failed to teach her even the basics of proper manners. It was the first time in 3 years he had seen her without those tacky nightclub outfits, but the attempt at elegance fooled nobody. As far as Yechin was concerned, there wasn't a shred of real class there. Yuan froze, completely stunned by the bodyguard's audacity, blinded by his own arrogance. Sikyang kept treating his former son-in-law like some uniformed servant and loudly demanded to know where the CEO was. Realizing the 2 idiots still hadn't connected the dots, Yechin smirked and casually informed them that he was there personally to evaluate the luxury condo project's technical reports. Sikyang burst into sarcastic laughter, mocking the young man as nothing more than a muscle-brained meathead and questioning how a glorified badge checker could possibly understand high finance. Fed up with the stupidity, Yechin turned to head back to his office. Desperate not to waste the trip, Yuan rushed after him and grabbed his shoulder, switching tactics to full-on gossip mode. Since he had been glued to the vice president for the past 3 days, she figured he probably knew all about the mysterious president's personal life. The heiress's eyes sparkled with ambition. She demanded to know how close Chin Hongyan and the mysterious president really were, shamelessly fishing for juicy details about where they spent their nights together. Yechin immediately caught on to her game. Knowing his cousin was the biggest gossip in town and would spread any rumor like wildfire, he decided to turn her own poison against her and protect the executive. Looking straight into Yuan's eyes, he coldly declared that the big boss and the vice president had just officially broken up for good. The news hit both visitors like a bomb. Sikyang and his daughter nearly stumbled backward from the shock, but the surprise quickly turned into pure excitement. The man practically thanked the heavens for what he considered a miracle, while Yuan flashed a victorious smile, fully convinced her path to the billionaire's heart was now completely wide open. Yechin simply stood there watching the ridiculous celebration, quietly amused by his cousin's delusion. The young woman started rambling, mocking the fact that the former delivery guy happened to share the same last name as the corporation's powerful boss. Sikyang jumped in with more sarcasm, pointing at Yechin and declaring that once his daughter married the president, the bodyguard would go right back to being their personal servant. The family's plan was obvious: hook the billionaire, take control of the business, and force Yechin back under their thumb. Curious about their absurd confidence, the young CEO asked why his cousin was so certain she could win over the most powerful man in the region. Ego completely inflated, Yuan confidently declared that no man could resist her charms and proudly revealed her greatest trump card. She was absolutely convinced the mysterious president was the secret admirer who had sent Grandma Hang that 10 million yuan jade bracelet days earlier. Barely holding back his laughter at such delusion, Yechin shut her fantasy down, calmly stating that he had personally sent the luxury jewelry himself, not some hidden admirer. The heiress completely ignored the truth and burst into laughter, somehow taking his words as confirmation that the gift really had come from the president's office. Glowing with excitement, she hugged her father and celebrated the fact that the multinational company's owner was already wrapped around her finger, eager to rush back to the mansion and tell the matriarch the good news. Yechin watched the whole circus in silence, finding it pathetic how desperately those people were trying to cling to a powerful last name to climb the social ladder. Wanting to cut the nonsense and get straight to business, Yuan Yen demanded to know where the president was hiding so they could finally sign the paperwork. With a cold, piercing stare, the young man pointed at himself and bluntly stated that the company president was standing right in front of them, still waiting for the technical report her father had conveniently forgotten to hand over. The young executive's mockery struck a nerve with the social climbing duo. Already fed up with the arrogant investor's attitude and the daughter's shameless behavior, throwing herself at the corporation's new president at every chance, Yechin coldly shut down the act, calling her behavior embarrassing before leaving them standing there in the lobby. Inside the waiting room, Sikyang held his daughter back, stopping her from storming after him and causing a scene that could ruin their first impression with the multinational company's leader. Frustrated, the investor demanded the reception desk notify the president's office the very second the boss became available. The answer came 5 minutes later when Secretary Rongrong returned with a short message. The president had already left the building for outside appointments, and they were free to leave. The shock hit instantly. Sikyang, who had already started imagining himself as the future father-in-law of the most powerful man in the region, demanded to know when the president would return. But the secretary remained firm, explaining that her boss's afternoon schedule was unpredictable. Fuming over the rejection, the young heiress nearly threw a tantrum right there, but her father calmed her down. To them, the expensive jade bracelet gifted at the birthday party was undeniable proof of the billionaire's interest. It was only a matter of time before they sealed the deal. Back at the mansion, the emergency family meeting called by the pair immediately caught Yayao's attention, and she quickly asked whether the financial agreement had finally been signed. Instead of talking business, her cousin proudly announced the big news. The mysterious president of Huash was the real person behind the 10 million yuan gift sent to the matriarch. The revelation crushed the last bit of hope Yayao had secretly held onto, that the extravagant gift might somehow have been Yechin's attempt at winning her back. Her aunt immediately piled on, smugly pointing out that the billionaire's breakup with Vice President Qin Hongyan opened the door for the Hang family to climb to the top of the city's elite circle. In Yuan's mind, the math was simple. The billionaire had sent the bracelet as a clear sign of romantic interest in her. However, Grandma Hang frowned while thinking through the timeline, finding it strange that such a wealthy man would make a move while Yayao had still technically been married to her former husband. To the rest of the family, it was obvious. A gift that expensive could only come from a man completely smitten with Yuan, overflowing with confidence. The young woman promised the matriarch she would use every weapon in her arsenal to lock down the billionaire and push the Hang family to the top of high society for good, earning praise from the old woman for her ambition. Sitting off to the side, Yayao questioned whether the story was even true, but her cousin mocked her immediately, pointing out that the information came directly from the useless bodyguard she had thrown away. Wen Yen announced that she would head back to company headquarters after lunch to seal the deal, and, just to rub salt in the wound, ordered Yayao to act as her personal driver. Humiliated in front of the entire family, the heiress exploded in rage, shouting that she had better things to do before slamming the door and storming out. Her mother tried to stop her, but Yayao ignored the shouting, jumped into her car, and sped off recklessly, fueling herself with hatred toward her ex-husband as she drove aimlessly. Blinded by anger, she didn't notice the massive tree trunk ahead until it was far too late. The crash was brutal. Trapped inside the wrecked vehicle, Yayao cried out in pain and despair, blaming Yechin for every bit of her misery. Meanwhile, back at corporate headquarters, the president was signing off on the week's paperwork when his phone rang. The second he answered, he was hit with Yayao's hysterical screaming and insults. Completely confused by the sudden rage, the young CEO quickly realized his ex-wife was still the same immature person she had always been, incapable of taking responsibility for her own mistakes. Shouting at the top of her lungs, the young woman accused him of being a manipulative fraud who had exposed the truth about the jade bracelet to her family just to publicly humiliate her. Yechin kept his tone ice cold and fired back immediately. He had never lied about anything, and if her family was too stupid to see reality, that was entirely their problem. Yayao's mind burned with jealousy as she replayed the image of her grandmother showering Yuan with praise, convinced the owner of Huash had fallen head over heels for her cousin. To make things worse, being ordered to become Yuan's personal driver had hit a nerve. If her cousin actually married the billionaire, Yahyao would be completely pushed aside within the family. On the other end of the line, Yechin listened to the bitter rant and sarcastically asked if she was jealous of the young master. Cornered, the heiress reluctantly admitted that playboy Fang Chao couldn't even compare to the corporation president, considering he didn't even run his own family's business. Feeling cornered, Yahyao tried to reclaim her pride by attacking her ex-husband. With complete disdain, she insisted Fang Chao was still 1,000 times better than Yechin, claiming the rich heir walked proudly through life while the former delivery guy remained nothing but a walking embarrassment. Tired of the hysterics and nonsense, the CEO threatened to hang up, reminding her that he actually had real work to do. Panicking, Yahyao immediately changed her tone and begged him not to hang up because she desperately needed a favor. Yechin raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious about the nerve she had. The young woman proposed an absurd plan to sabotage her cousin's meeting. She wanted him, using his supposed role as a security guard, to slip laxatives into Yuan's black tea, or somehow rip her dress in the hallway, barely holding back laughter. The president calmly told her none of that would be necessary because the boss had absolutely no intention of meeting the visitor in the first place. Yahyao dismissed it as sarcasm and demanded he stop lying, insisting a mere bodyguard could never influence decisions at the very top of the company. Too tired to keep explaining the truth, Yechin hung up on her, leaving her absolutely furious. At 2 in the afternoon, Yuan showed up at Huash headquarters radiating confidence. She marched through reception and demanded Rongrong escort her straight to the president's office. The secretary kept her professional composure and blocked the request, coldly informing her that the president had absolutely no intention of meeting someone with such a complete lack of professionalism and manners. As the young woman stood there in shock, already seeing herself as the future lady of the empire, the secretary delivered management's final decision. The luxury condo project was officially on hold until the Hang family sent an actual qualified representative to negotiate. Rongrong played her cards perfectly, casually mentioning that the big boss had been watching short videos from Yuan's profile. That alone was enough to send the girl over the moon, fully convinced the billionaire was her #1 fan online. Feeling like she completely owned the situation, Yuan agreed to send another negotiator, but made sure to leave an informal message behind. She asked them to invite the executive out for coffee or even a movie, promising she would be fully available. Before walking away, Yuan opened her blue purse and pulled out a stack of cash, trying to bribe the secretary in exchange for a secret photo of the CEO. Rongrong calmly pushed the young woman's hand back, rejecting the money on the spot. With an ironic tone, the secretary fed the visitor's ego, whispering that her boss was ridiculously handsome and just the right age for her. As soon as the heiress strutted away, Rongrong let out a mocking smile, mentally labeling the girl as nothing more than curves with absolutely no brains. Meanwhile, the scene shifted dramatically to the towering skyscrapers and glowing bridges of a nearby metropolis. At the top of a high-rise building, the influential underground boss, Liu Senkun, was calmly pouring himself a drink when Melancia burst in chaotically. With his wrist wrapped in bandages and no way to hide the disaster, the gangster admitted that his operation at Sishan Villa had been a complete failure and that he urgently needed reinforcements to contain the damage. The detailed story of the beatdown instantly made Senkin lose his patience. In one fast and brutal motion, the crime boss smashed a glass directly over Melancia's head, furious that a single man had sent nearly 80 of his goons to the hospital. Blood trickled down his forehead as the subordinate collapsed to his knees, begging forgiveness for his incompetence. Senkun lit a cigar and slowly exhaled the smoke, warning that the days of solving everything through brute force were long gone. He pointed out that their operation needed to work smarter if they wanted to survive in the current landscape. Humiliated and desperate for revenge, Melancia begged for command of an elite squad of 100 men to hunt Yechin down and wipe him out once and for all. Senkun grabbed his phone and, before making the call, started laying out the plan that would completely shift the direction of the war. Senkun recalled that both he and Melancia were orphans who owed everything they had to the Fan family. Hearing his boss speak with such reverence about the family patriarch, the gangster finally grasped the weight of that legendary authority. Mr. Fan was the true mastermind behind the empire and even Senkun's rise to power. During the phone call, while arranging a trip to the city of Junchao to locate the veteran, Senkun was informed that the old man had already arrived in the region. The news instantly lifted the crime boss's spirits, and he took it as a sign of good fortune. Excited, Melancia begged to join the trip and finally meet his boss's legendary mentor. Sen-kun let out an ironic laugh and shut him down immediately, reminding him that Mr. Fan didn't meet with just anyone. Even he had to schedule an audience in advance. The boss ordered the tickets to be booked, planning to pay his respects to the old mentor while also crushing Yechin during the same trip. Melancia obeyed immediately, thrilled at the chance to destroy his rival. By nightfall, gossip had completely taken over the Hang Mansion. Sikiang was still trying to process his daughter's story. Yuan kept up her confident act, swearing that the Huash president had turned down the meeting only because he felt intimidated by her beauty, insisting the billionaire had totally fallen for her. Since the corporation had requested a new representative, the uncle decided to send his son Zoe to the meeting the next day. The playboy gladly accepted the mission, laughing at the thought of humiliating Yechin in the corporate setting if he happened to spot him there in uniform. The following morning, the doors of an impressive colonial mansion opened in Junchao. Sen-kun entered with complete humility, bowing deeply before the elderly man in a flawless suit resting in a leather armchair. Mr. Fan took a sip of coffee and told the mob boss to drop the formalities, reminding him that he now ruled his own territory. With complete respect, Sen-kun reaffirmed his eternal loyalty, but admitted he was curious about his mentor's sudden return after years of exile in England. The old man placed his cup on the table and revealed the real reason for his trip. The supreme patriarch of the dynasty had personally assigned him to fully support and protect the third young master of the imperial family, who was operating undercover in the city. The revelation left the underground boss completely frozen, never imagining that the direct heir to the most powerful empire in the country was right there within reach. The weight of that information crushed Sen-kun's composure. He knew very well that the elderly man in front of him answered directly to the imperial clan, an invisible force pulling the strings behind the country and existing light years above any local mafia. Mr. Fan's tone shifted into a stern warning as he ordered the underworld leader to keep his men on a tight leash so none of them dared cross paths with the third young master or risk total annihilation. Swallowing hard, the crime boss nervously asked whether the heir was in any danger in the city, worried that his own men might have already made a fatal mistake without realizing it. The veteran motioned to his assistant, who immediately handed over a photo of the young man so the visitors could memorize the face of royalty. Sen-kun took the picture with trembling hands and studied the young man's features, impressed by the heir's commanding presence and sharp gaze. Mr. Fan explained that the young man would remain undercover in the area for another 2 years before questioning why Sen-kun had brought so many Southeast Asian mercenaries into Junchao. With no way out, the mob boss admitted he had only come to settle a problem involving one of his subordinates, the gangster Melancia, who had been beaten badly a few days earlier. The old man exhaled a cloud of smoke and delivered an ultimatum. No violent operations would be tolerated in the city if they risked disturbing the heir. To end the conversation, he challenged his protege to a game of chess to test how much his tactical skills had improved. Meanwhile, arrogance was boiling over in Huash's reception area. Zoe had already spent 2 full hours rotting in the waiting room, fuming over the disrespect from the company's mysterious boss. To kill time, he decided to call Yechin and mock his ex-brother-in-law. On the other end, the president answered with complete boredom in his voice. 5 minutes later, Yechin walked through the lobby and calmly asked what exactly the playboy wanted there. With his arms crossed, Zoe demanded to know the exact location of the president's office. Wearing an ironic smile, the CEO explained that the boss was stuck in an extremely important meeting, wasting precious time trying to explain basic business concepts to someone with serious cognitive issues. Completely missing the insult, the Hang heir burst out laughing, agreeing that the president was probably wasting time on some clueless idiot from the business world, never realizing he was the punchline. Irritated by the former delivery guy's confidence, the playboy stepped up to him, demanding to know how a mere uniformed bodyguard dared to talk with such arrogance, swearing he would make him pay for both the humiliation and the punches he took back at the mansion pavilion. After making it clear he would never forget what Yechin had done to him, Zoe told him about Melancia's revenge plan. He warned him not to let his guard down, saying the rival was gathering an army of 100 thugs for the next showdown. Later that day, on his way back from work, Yechin couldn't stop thinking about the warning. He started worrying about the safety of his colleague, Qin Hongyan, fearing the criminals might come after her. Determined to end the problem once and for all, Yechin decided to go all in. He ordered Zoe to lure the gang directly into the building's underground parking garage, demanding that no one interfere and that everyone wait for the right moment. Amused by the boldness, Zoe had Melancia gather the men, eager to see whether the CEO could actually handle the pressure. The meeting point was the corporation's dark underground garage, where employees parked their vehicles. When Yechin arrived, he found Zoe looking completely confident, pacing back and forth. With a smug grin, the villain bragged about shutting down the entire surveillance system, claiming he could end Yechin's life right there without leaving a single trace. But that was exactly the opening Yechin had been waiting for. Without cameras to worry about, he no longer had to hold back. Before Zoe could even process what was happening, Yechin rushed forward and unleashed a brutal flurry of punches straight into his face. Desperate, Zoe begged him to stop, but Yechin kept beating him mercilessly, demanding answers for setting up the ambush. The beating only stopped when Yechin lifted Zoe by the collar, just as the gang's footsteps echoed through the garage. Melancia appeared leading the group, immediately ordering the attack to crush the company's leader. Alone in the middle of the parking structure, Yechin suddenly found himself surrounded by armed and dangerous thugs, all ready to finish him off. The fight erupted instantly. The first thug rushed in and took a direct punch to the jaw, while the second was launched across the garage by a vicious kick. Even for a skilled fighter, taking on 10 men at once was far from easy, and Zoe, sprawled on the ground, still tried to throw threats at him. Melancia's goal was simple: cripple his rival for good, destroying any chance of him ever working as a bodyguard again. The thug mocked him, saying he shouldn't even try fighting professionals, but offered him a humiliating way out. If Yechin dropped to his knees and called him Big Brother, he could walk away alive. Yechin refused to bow his head, firing back that those thugs weren't even good enough to clean floors. Seeing the confidence, Melancia called for 10 more hardened fighters, fully aware the current group wouldn't last 10 minutes before getting crushed by Yechin. All the commotion caught the attention of Mr. Liu, a major figure visiting the area, who had never imagined someone of this caliber existed in the country and suddenly grew interested in recruiting him. 10 minutes later, the experienced Liu Senkun stormed into the corporation's underground garage to back them up. Melancia nearly celebrated when he saw his powerful ally arrive. The gangster rushed over to Liu, whining that they should have brought all 100 men from the start to wipe Yechin out. Liu cut him off immediately and told his subordinate to step aside so he could evaluate the target himself, curious about the man causing so much destruction. Yechin's situation was becoming critical. Even though he had handled the first 10 thugs, the physical strain had drained almost all of his energy. If another wave came at him, exhaustion would start taking its toll. Quickly analyzing the situation, he decided the best strategy was to charge directly at Liu to destabilize the rest of the gang. Watching this, Zoe laughed loudly, warning him that messing with Liu was suicide and suggesting he beg for mercy while he still could. That was when the atmosphere shifted completely. The moment Liu Senkun focused his eyes on Yechin, he froze. The shock of recognizing that face hit him so hard that words failed him. Confused, Zoe shouted from behind, ordering his ally to kill Yechin immediately. Liu's response was a violent punch that nearly sent Zoe flying. Blood pouring down his face and completely unable to understand the betrayal, Zoe could only stare in absolute shock as Liu Senkun dropped to his knees before Yechin. The gang leader didn't hesitate, bowing deeply in front of him. The resemblance between Yechin and the third young master from the photo burned into his memory was undeniable. Introducing himself as a loyal subordinate of the prestigious Lion faction, the man confessed his terror of being punished, admitting that not even 100 deaths would make up for the mistake of opposing the Empire's rightful heir. In disbelief, Zoe exploded, calling Yechin trash and a parasite, unable to accept that someone so ordinary commanded criminals of that level. Melancia also thought his boss had gone insane and mistaken him for someone else. Furious at the disrespect, Liu grabbed Melancia by the throat, forced him to his knees, and ordered him to slam his forehead against the floor repeatedly until Yechin accepted the apology. Terrified, Melancia began hitting himself, desperately begging for forgiveness, and calling himself blind for not recognizing the true master. Meanwhile, Zoe stood there completely lost, unable to understand how Yechin had somehow become the boss of an entire criminal empire. With an icy tone, Yechin ordered Melancia to stop the performance and tell the truth to the Wang family, exposing the lie about the stolen luxury watch. Without hesitation, the thug pointed directly at Zoe, revealing that the entire setup had been his idea. Panic immediately took over Zoe as he begged not to be betrayed like that, but Liu acted faster, ordering his men to drag the scumbag away and dump him in the river for trying to tarnish the young master's name. Desperate and in tears, Zoe crawled toward Yechin, begging for mercy in the name of their family ties. With complete disgust, Yechin stepped aside, making it clear he never considered him family. Trying to bargain for his own survival, Zoe promised to return Yuan and bring the sisters, Yahyao and Yui, back as well. Yechen felt disgusted, realizing the coward was willing to sacrifice his own sisters just to save himself. Even so, Yechen ordered the thugs to let the miserable man go for now. After returning home under the protagonist's orders, Zoe was forced to come clean in front of everyone, giving a detailed account of every step of the ambush he had set up against the family's son-in-law. Zoe rushed off like a man sentenced to death to carry out the orders, swearing loyalty and repeatedly thanking Yechen. Shortly afterward, Lu Senkun formally introduced himself to the young master as Lord Fan's trusted right-hand man, placing all 100 warriors brought from Asia under Yechen's complete command and loyalty. Yechen ordered Lu to withdraw the army from the scene, knowing that kind of brute force would be extremely useful for his future plans. Back at the family mansion, Zoe showed up with his face completely wrecked. When the relatives questioned his injuries, he lied, claiming he had gotten into an accident from driving recklessly. To avoid digging himself into an even deeper hole, especially knowing Yechen now had the mafia under his control, Zoe confessed everything to his grandmother and uncle, clearing the son-in-law of the accusation that he had stolen the luxury watch. Instead of being shocked by her grandson's dirty scheme, the Wang family matriarch brushed it off. To her, Yechen was still far from innocent. After all, if he wasn't a thief, where would someone that broke get the money to stay at a 5-star hotel? Determined to bury the issue, the old woman changed the subject and asked whether her grandson had managed to secure a meeting with President Ye at the corporation. She complained about the president's arrogance, finding it ridiculous that a man in his position expected her to go there and bow down just to close a deal. That was when Yahyao stepped in, asking her grandmother for permission to go to the company herself. She explained that since she had developed the project together with Yechen, the president had specifically requested to negotiate directly with one of the creators. The other granddaughter, Yuan, protested angrily, reminding everyone that the whole family had already begged the company director without success, and now they would have to bow to Yahyao's wishes. In the end, the grandmother gave in and approved Yahyao's visit, stirring even more jealousy among the rest of the family. The old woman made it crystal clear that if her granddaughter failed and came back empty-handed, she would personally confront the president herself, since the family absolutely needed that contract with the corporation. 2 hours later, Yahyao arrived at the company's main lobby. She went straight to the reception desk and asked the secretary for President Ye. Due to the CEO's packed schedule, the employee instructed the young woman to wait in the lounge while management was notified of her arrival. The president treated the guest courteously. When Yahyao received the cup, she noticed it was nothing more than warm water with honey, but accepted it anyway. As she sat down, the drink triggered a wave of nostalgia, reminding her that over the past 3 years, her ex-husband Yechen used to make that exact same drink for her at home. Meanwhile, Vice President Qin Hongyan entered the executive office and informed Yechen about Huang Yahyao's arrival. The assistant waited for instructions on whether or not the visitor should be allowed in. Yechen had already thrown out the rest of her greedy relatives, but he knew that if he turned Yahyao away now, her family would assume he was acting out of spite. Since the plan was to close the deal anyway, the partnership would guarantee them a massive payout. Yechen ordered Qin Hongyan to bring over the contract documents and open the door to receive his ex-wife. The moment Yahyao saw Yechen standing there, she froze. He was dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, exactly the warm and relaxed style he used to wear every day when they lived together. Given the president's reputation for being busy and nearly impossible to access, she never expected to find him there and, confused, asked her ex-husband to simply stay with her during the meeting. Getting straight to the point, Yechen explained that he was there to discuss the project. He handed her the document and asked her to review the terms, warning that if everything looked good, the Wang family would receive a total of 70 million yuan, divided into 3 payments throughout the week. Yahyao took the papers, shocked by how easily management had approved the proposal without demanding endless rounds of technical discussions. But the real shock came when she opened the folder. Printed boldly across the first page was the title, First Class Yahyao Project. She stared at her ex-husband in complete shock, unable to process the reason behind the tribute. At that exact moment, her mind drifted back 6 months. She vividly remembered Yechen sitting in front of his laptop, wearing an old t-shirt, fully focused on developing the framework for an innovative dementia treatment. That night, he had looked at her affectionately and told her he was building the concept exclusively for his wife, naming the project after her. Yechen had designed every detail of that plan thinking about his partner's future, determined to launch it himself if the Wang family rejected the proposal after 3 years. It had been his greatest gift to her. Back then, she had simply rested on the office couch, completely unaware the project already carried her name. He never could have imagined how drastically their relationship would change later, turning their once warm home into something cold and lifeless, ultimately forcing the project onto a different path. Reading the document, Yahyao asked whether Yechen had begged the company president to keep the original title. She simply couldn't believe the head of such a massive corporation would listen to requests from someone she still saw as nothing more than a humble bodyguard. Then, stepping closer, she held his hand and thanked him for all the effort. Keeping up the disguise, Yechen brushed the topic aside and explained that the president had simply liked the name Yahyao, thinking it sounded elegant. The young woman accepted the excuse, convinced that the company's powerful CEO had given in to the persistence of a bodyguard who was still hopelessly in love with her. Trying to cut through the emotional moment, Yechen told her to stop overthinking and just sign the papers already. The moment the contract was signed and stamped, Yahyao smiled in relief, imagining how proud her grandmother would be once she saw the deal finally secured. As Yechen prepared to make a copy for the company files, she stopped him. Pleased with how everything had turned out, she wanted to repay the favor by inviting him to lunch at a small pasta restaurant on the outskirts of town, a place he used to love going to in the past. Yechen turned her down immediately, claiming he had no time and pretending not to even remember the name of the place, a chicken noodle spot he had visited dozens of times, making it painfully obvious that whatever feelings he once had for her were gone. Silenced by his coldness, Yahyao grew irritated and reminded him how often they used to go there because he loved it. Seeing he wasn't going to budge, she snapped back, saying that if that was the case, she'd rather go eat steak with Fang Chao instead. The tension in the room broke when the stunning Qin Hongyan walked into the executive office. Yahyao immediately recognized the corporation's influential vice president and swallowed hard as the executive greeted her with flawless professionalism. Feeling completely out of place and uncomfortable, the ex-wife hurried out of the office as fast as possible. After the young woman left, Qin Hongyan quietly thought to herself how blind Yahyao had been to trade a man like President Ye for someone as insignificant as Fang Chao. Looking at Yechen, the vice president noticed from the distant look in his eyes that he still carried emotional scars and unresolved feelings about the past. Knowing how painful the situation was for him, she suggested canceling the deal immediately and tearing up the contract with the Wang family, especially after the way Yahyao had crossed the line with her little provocation. Yechen, however, chose to keep the deal in place. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Qin Hongyan tried to lighten the mood and change the subject, mentioning how much she enjoyed trying local food and suggesting the two of them go eat at that same chicken noodle restaurant on the outskirts of town. Pretending to hesitate for a moment, Yechen accepted the invitation, secretly making the assistant overjoyed. An hour and a half later, the two arrived at the restaurant. Keeping his guard up, Yechen commented that the place was far from luxurious and that the simple environment might not suit someone in her position. Qin Hongyan smiled and pushed back, saying she loved cheap, everyday food and wasn't some spoiled rich girl with impossible standards. Yechen complimented her attitude, mentioning how much he admired the fact that she had built her success through her own hard work instead of relying on family money. But while they walked, the executive suddenly grabbed his arm, apologizing and explaining that her high heels had nearly made her twist an ankle on the uneven sidewalk. Yechen was understanding, assuring her it was fine and steadying her so she could walk comfortably. That physical contact stirred up a bitter wave of nostalgia inside him. He remembered all the times over the last 3 years that he had dreamed of walking into that same restaurant hand in hand with Yahyao, only to be met with cold rejection every time. Comparing the pain of the past to the company beside him now, Yechen pushed the thoughts away, fully aware that by now his ex-wife was probably in another man's arms. Noticing the sudden paleness in his face, Qin Hongyan showed concern for his condition. Yechen tried to reassure her, making it clear she didn't need to stay formal outside the office and could simply call him by his name. His exhausted expression caught the assistant's attention, making her wonder what was weighing on him so heavily. He brushed it off, but his mind was far away, imagining Yahyao and her new boyfriend sharing romantic moments at some fancy restaurant. Irritated by the thought, Yechen even briefly considered having Lu Senkun teach Fang Chao a lesson harsh enough to take him out of the picture for good. Meanwhile, at a healthy food cafe inside a shopping mall, Yahyao was having lunch with her friend Song. Curious about the occasion, Song asked what they were celebrating, and with obvious pride, Yahyao slid a blue folder containing the corporation's signed contract across the table. As Song looked through the documents, she was stunned by the Wang family's victory and especially shocked to see Yahyao's name printed in the project title. Smirking mischievously, Song joked that the only explanation was that her friend had gotten involved with the corporation's mysterious president. Yahyao immediately denied it, clearly offended by the joke. Laughing at the reaction, Song brought up Yahyao's old plan to move into a rented apartment with Fang Chao to focus on the family's investments. Yahyao grabbed the papers back, called her friend ridiculous, and immediately called Fang Chao, asking for the financial support he had promised the Wang family. In truth, Yahyao's biggest goal was to shove that contract in her grandmother's face and finally earn the respect her side of the family deserved. She admitted that the project created by her ex-husband had been brilliant, even if everyone else treated Yechen like a nobody. Her original plan had been to help him grow in life through that idea, but the divorce had ruined everything. In her own mind, Yahyao saw herself as a martyr who had sacrificed her marriage for everyone's future, convincing herself that she only tolerated Fang Chao for the sake of financial gain, while Song quietly smiled, seeing her friend as one of the most naive people alive. Song asked why the project carried Yahyao's name, and the young woman explained that Yechen had supposedly humbled himself, practically begging the company president to keep the original title. Song found it incredible that the ex-husband had been willing to throw away his pride out of pure love just to honor her. Praising Yahyao's charm, Song encouraged her to stick to the plan. Marry Fang Chao, use his money to push the Wang family to the top of high society, and once the matriarch eventually passed away, kick Zoe and Yuan Wen to the curb for good. By Song's calculations, Yahyao stood to walk away with at least half of the inheritance, somewhere around 500 million. And if Fang Chao started becoming a headache down the line, she could always file for divorce. At that rate, before even turning 30, she would already be a multimillionaire, free to enjoy life with younger guys, or maybe even take her ex back if she felt like it. Whether it was wishful thinking or not, Song jokingly begged her friend not to forget about her once she got rich, and Yahyao, staring off into the distance, agreed before raising a toast to celebrate the future she believed was already secured. At 7 in the evening, the family mansion buzzed with tension as Huan Yuan complained about the timing of the family meeting, whining that she had plans to go to the movies. Her father immediately shut her down and told her to pay attention, revealing that the deal with the massive corporation had finally moved forward. Walking into the room with complete confidence, Yahyao tossed the folder onto the table and proudly announced that the contract had been signed, securing a massive 70 million yuan investment that would hit the family's account in daily installments. The announcement made her uncle and cousin jump from their seats in complete disbelief. Burning with jealousy and suspicion, Huan Yuan rushed to inspect the paperwork herself. The moment she saw the title First Class Yahyao Project, she nearly lost it, accusing her cousin of altering the contract out of vanity just to inflate her own importance over what should have been a family-wide project. Yahyao didn't even flinch. She calmly reminded her uncle that she had direct connections with upper management and pulled out her phone, fully prepared to call the vice president and prove the contract's legitimacy in front of everyone. Her uncle ended the call in total shock, confirming that the agreement was 100% real. He turned toward his daughter, who was still standing there speechless, and confirmed that the company had officially approved the deal. Faced with the guaranteed fortune, the family matriarch finally dropped her cold attitude and showered Yahyao with praise, admitting she never imagined her granddaughter would manage to pull 70 million out of a company that size. Still swallowing her pride, Huan Yuan demanded to know what trick Yahyao had used on the president to land the deal and why the project carried her name. Suspicious of foul play, she started throwing accusations, bringing up Yahyao's recent divorce and hinting that she must have used questionable methods to persuade the executive. Furious and yelling through the house, Huan Yuan stormed out and slammed the door behind her, completely ignoring the grandmother's shouts for her to come back. Holding the blue folder in her hands, Yahyao looked directly at the matriarch and assured her that she had not done anything shameless, insisting that the deal had been secured in a completely clean and professional way. The elderly woman nodded, but when it came time to hand out power, she changed the rules entirely. She appointed the uncle as general manager of the project, while demoting Yahyao and even her own father to assistant-level roles responsible for the heavy lifting. Yahyao exploded in frustration, reminding everyone that the project carried her name and that she had personally signed the agreement at the corporation's headquarters, making absolutely no sense for her to be sidelined. Her uncle immediately shut her down with a harsh lecture, calling her disrespectful for even thinking about stepping over her elder's authority. Trying to calm the situation, the grandmother stepped in and justified the decision by claiming Yahyao lacked experience. According to her, the young woman should learn from the ground up under the supervision of family members, and if she proved herself in the future, more responsibility would come. Swallowing her anger, Yahyao simply nodded in agreement. She thanked the matriarch and promised to give everything she had to the company, but deep down, she swore to herself that she would never again allow relatives to steal credit for her hard work. Even while trying to recover emotionally, Yahyao still had to deal with Huan Yuan, who came back home fuming. Her cousin kept throwing insults, calling her a pathetic divorced woman and accusing her of shamelessly throwing herself at President Ye. To Huan Yuan, it was unbearable watching Yahyao enjoy the rewards of so much hard work, while that useless Chen had almost ruined everything. Desperate to destroy any chance of Yahyao getting close to the company president, a twisted idea suddenly formed in Huan Yuan's mind. The easiest way to neutralize her cousin once and for all would be to throw her into another man's arms. If Yahyao got remarried, any path toward President Ye would be completely blocked. Without wasting a second, she grabbed her phone and demanded that her brother send over Fang Chao's contact information. When Fang Chao answered the call, he was visibly surprised. He couldn't understand why the attractive cousin was suddenly reaching out, though he wasted no time saving her number in his messaging app. Getting straight to the point, Huan Yuan said they needed to have a serious talk and asked if he was free. When he claimed to be busy, she dropped the bomb immediately. Yahyao had just secured the 70 million contract, the project carried her name, and rumors inside the company suggested that President Ye had completely fallen for her. The news hit Fang Chao like a punch to the gut. He knew perfectly well that President Yi controlled an empire powerful enough to crush anyone in the city. Sensing his panic, Huan Yuan pressed harder, urging him to act quickly before losing his chance, and pushing him to propose to Yahyao immediately. Fang Chao, who had already been chasing after Yahyao for a while, hesitated because of her recent divorce, worried that making a move too soon could backfire. But Huan Yuan kept pushing, boosting his ego by saying her cousin was the most desirable woman in the region, and that winning her over would be easy, especially since trash like Chen no longer meant anything in her life. That was enough to set off alarm bells in Fang Chao's head. He bitterly remembered the hotel night when he had almost managed to sleep with Yahyao, only for the plan to be ruined by the sudden arrival of her ex-husband. Determined not to let the opportunity slip away a second time, and now with a powerful ally inside the Wang family, the playboy agreed to team up with Huan Yuan, ready to use every bit of help possible to finally make Yahyao his once and for all. And that's the end of another video. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to leave a like. It helps a ton. And if you stayed until the end, comment which character annoyed you the most in this chapter. I really want to see what you guys think. God bless you all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.